An immortal master of cultivation suffers a blow from his allies. He ends up being reborn in the body of a young man. To continue in this new body, he realizes he must avenge the young man's family. Thus, he begins to help the people of the family, while trying to cultivate to return to the immortal world. A healthy young woman criticizes her brother for supporting their father against the Mu family, believing that no one will ally with them after this. Her mafia brother says that this is no problem, as that family is worthless, and he even mentions that he took care of Chenfeng Mu. The criminal explains that he did this because the loser was pursuing the girl, and their father is already arranging a marriage for her with the Wang family. Elsewhere, the protagonist wakes up surprised to find himself in Blue Star and realizes that the name of the owner of this body is Chenfeng Mu. Our young man was a genius who reached the immortal level in less than 1,000 years, until he understood the origin of the Dao body and can now increase his level even further. However, the gossip spread and the boy was attacked by 3 emperors. His body couldn't withstand it, and only a fragment of his original spirit survived. The protagonist heard that the energy of Blue Star was bad, but didn't think it would be this bad, so the most he can do is recover some levels. He also inherited the karma of the owner of this body, so he will avenge the guy and protect his family, and after that, he will return to the immortal world. In an alley, an 18-year-old girl named Yulan tries to get rid of some strange men who know she is the little girl from the Mu family. Our young man decides to intervene and judges the men for bothering such a young girl. Yulan is happy to see her young master, and the clueless guy beside her asks to deal with the boy who ruined his fun. 2 tough-looking men come running towards the protagonist. Chenfeng tries to understand why a bunch of fighters is trying to compete with a cultivator like him and gives one of them a slap. The boy makes a pile of thugs and comments that now he knows one of their surnames is Jeng. The young woman hugs her master, relieved to have escaped, and a suspicious breeze blows at that moment. As he holds the girl, the protagonist realizes that she has a natural Dao body and could become an immortal empress one day, so he promises to protect her. Yulan remembers that the patriarch is still waiting, but Chenfeng tells her to forget about the old man and go home quickly. One of the losers gets all angry and decides to call his brother, telling him that he got a beating from the guy from the Mu family and that this is disrespectful. His big brother Chad is outraged and throws the woman into the air, calling his men to take a trip to the Tian-Er mansion. Meanwhile, Chenfeng goes to talk to Yulan's mother, who is sick and trying to rest in her bed. Outside, the musclehead tells his henchmen to invade the residence since no one has left yet. Our young man tries to have his tea when suddenly the thugs appear, happy to find the young master there as well. The boy wants to know where they got the courage for such an absurdity and tells the man to take his lackeys and leave. Some time passes and now the thugs are face to face with the protagonist and his protected one. The crazies try to intimidate our young man unsuccessfully, as he just wants to enjoy his tea in peace. But the men are relentless and decide to attack anyway. A few moments later, Chenfeng is lounging on his sofa while the mobsters have turned into his maids. The boy asks what will come of all this, and Chad responds that he can give him some money to calm down. Then the protagonist suggests 2 million, explaining that it's quite annoying to have all these criminals in his house and saying they can leave when the money comes in. The guys scramble to gather that amount, and in the end, Chenfeng even asks for a neck massage. What a good life. At that moment, the boy receives his money and comments that next time it won't be so easy, prompting the gang leader to promise to behave. The so-called Jeng leaves the mansion with his tail between his legs and yells at his bodyguards that he only lost because of them, who can understand the mind of a fool. Now at the Jeng residence, that sane healthy young woman questions how her brother ended up so beaten up, and the butler says it was a fight. She thinks that this was actually good for his character development, and then asks if there is any information about Wu Xiaofan, the little princess of the Wu family. Upon learning all about the girl's schedule as if she were a stalker, Jeng asks her employee to arrange a date between the two of them. And then we return to the Tian-Er mansion, where the spoiled girl insists that the protagonist not leave until she is asleep. Look at her getting all emotional. Chenfeng did not expect so much to happen on the first day, and now he wants to stop by the antique market to see if he can find something useful for his cultivation. Wu Xiaofan walks alongside her Uncle Cheng and offers a piece of her snack, but the man declines as he is there for work and won't eat on the job. The little princess decides to check what is happening with that commotion up ahead. Jang Ki throws everything up in the air and comments that it is a coincidence to find Miss Wu there in Yuzhou. The crazy girl explains that they met 3 years ago and asks if she would like a personal guide, and Xiaofan thinks it would be a good idea to have a local guide. In another corner, Chenfeng walks side by side with his newest little keychain. The protagonist notices a jade pendant that has existed for over 1,000 years and has impressive spiritual energy. He buys the pendant for 500 bucks and is all happy with his find. Xiaofan also thinks this item is very beautiful and asks how much it is, but our guy replies that it was 500 and that it is now his. Jang Ki is shocked to see her former fling there, and she starts to create some paranoia in her head. She offers 50,000 for the object, but the boy is not interested in money at all. After hearing that the little princess is not happy, her uncle tries to resolve the issue, and Chenfeng wants to know if a robbery is going to happen or something like that. Chain offers 500,000 for the jade pendant, which leaves everyone around shocked, but the protagonist really does not want to sell the item. With that, the older man decides to prevent the boy from leaving, and it seems that things just got serious. Our guy questions whether he is really going to take the object by force, and the uncle explains that in this life, you can't offend certain people. The man charges at the boy, but is stopped with just a sinister little finger from Chenfeng. With that, the protagonist says that he is not the type of person who can be offended either. Cheofen asks who this guy is that stopped her uncle, the Master of Worlds, and is quite curious to learn that he is the illegitimate son of the head of the Mu family. The uncle tries to tell the protagonist that he is a hero and that he will no longer try to take the pendant. Chenfeng picks up the phone and hears a man say that he was taken by force to the Mu residence right after they separated. Our boy thinks that one of the voices on the call can only be Mu Lei, and Chang tries to recruit him after witnessing his talent. But the boy only comments that if he hears more of this talk, someone there is going to end up in a grave. The guy gets really scared, and then his niece asks to pull over the car because she found something interesting. Xiaofan offers a ride to the protagonist, who finds this help a bit suspicious. Jang Ki watches the scene and hopes that Mu Chenfeng does not interfere with her plans, deciding to go to the Mu residence as well. Meanwhile, the little princess annoys the boy by asking about his training, since his muscles are impressive. Some time later, our boy arrives at the Mu mansion and performs a flying kick on the guards who tried to prevent his entry. Xiaofan notices that the boy's flying kick was much stronger than Cheng's, and the old man comments that it is just age, right? Inside the mansion, a man shouts that Yulan should not have offended Jang Bai because this could be the end for them, and she still thinks she was wrong, poor thing. That bastard goes straight for the girl's hair and reminds her that there can only be one young master in this family. Suddenly, Chenfeng appears on the scene saying that the girl is his and that he will take down anyone who hurts her, and the other guy is surprised to see his brother. That damn little brother decides to play with danger, saying that he can hit anyone in the Mu family. The protagonist runs and throws the man away with just one strike. He says that he did something quite fair, a broken arm in exchange for a slap. It seems that Chenfeng managed to irritate his entire family this time. An old man comes down the stairs saying that it is absurd to cause so much confusion just for having learned some new kicks, then remembers that he is still alive. At that moment, a nurse informs that the fracture caused to the other guy will leave sequels, which makes him ask his grandfather to deal with the rebellious grandson. The spoiled kid knows that his grandpa is almost a great master and thinks this will be the end of his rebellion. With that, the elderly man orders his grandson to kneel right there, but Chenfeng questions whether he deserves such treatment. The old man decides to remind everyone who is in charge of the Mu family. But Chang appears out of nowhere and says that attacking the boy is not a good idea, so Chief Mu wonders what such a skilled guy is doing there. Xiaofan asks for permission to say a few words, and the fakes start to flatter the Harris. Chenfeng's clueless brother wonders why this rich girl is there, thinking that if he can get a date with her, his life will be made. The little princess pulls her strings to manipulate the old man and get the Mu family boy out of the picture once and for all. Of course, the grandfather falls for this plan and orders the boy to kneel, saying that after this, he can simply forget the Mu family forever. Our boy is not really keen on kneeling to grandpa, so the two prepare for a fight. But at that moment, Uncle Chang remembers that it's not a good idea to fight the boy and says that he is a great master. The whole family is shocked to hear this, as they thought Chenfeng was just a useless little bastard. Xiaofan starts laughing at the faces of the fools who expel the great master from their own house, and then invites the protagonist to the Wu residence. Jang Ki watches the scene and wonders what the hell is happening in this place. The old man questions whether this invitation is appropriate but gets rejected by the girl, who says that the boy has no more ties to the Mu family. She promises that the Wuz will provide all the materials and support for the boy to become one of the greatest masters of the empire. But he is not interested. With that, the cursed grandfather returns with his tail between his legs asking for mercy, and Chenfeng decides to let it go for now if no one bothers him. The old Mu offers the position of head of the family to the youngest great master, but he doesn't care about that either. Suddenly, Xiaofan appears out of nowhere and gives him a kiss on the cheek. The girl is interested in the stoic boy's coldness and wants to set up a date, but he is a bit busy right now, so the little princess decides to leave. Jang Ki asks what she missed since she doesn't understand anything, and Xiaofan comments that the girl is as foolish as the rest of the Mu family. The old folks of the Mu family quickly change their minds and now expect the little princess to become a relative, but this makes the envious brother angry. Chenfeng questions when he let others meddle in his affairs, He holds the keychain by the waist and says that if others meddle again, he will have to act out of ignorance. The two are already leaving when the crazy Jang Ki decides to confront them. The girl is shocked to see that the boy who used to be at her feet now doesn't care about her at all. Yulan also finds this change of attitude a bit strange, but the protagonist explains that they shouldn't waste time on a poor thing. The girl doesn't understand anything about evolution and cultivation talks, but Chenfeng believes it's better that she doesn't understand at all. Xiaofan appears eager to turn the boy into her boyfriend, and a keychain thinks it would be a good idea. But the protagonist thinks it's better if they just remain friends, and the little princess only becomes more interested in his cold behavior. Our boy knows that she doesn't need to humiliate herself since she is the only daughter of the Wu family, but the girl is really persistent. She has become infatuated with Chenfeng. Xiaofan manages to get the boy's number and leaves, saying she will be waiting for his message. Suddenly, Jang Ki appears wanting to confront him again, but what a drag this woman is. Meanwhile, the not-so-beloved brother is still angry about the whole situation and walks around grumbling while holding his injured shoulder. He stops Xiaofan near the exit and asks her to wait a little. The rascal tries to invite the little princess to spend a few more days at the Mu family mansion, but she is not interested at all. Then the guy begs and comments that he heard what was said to that little bastard, and the Harris is not happy at all to hear her crush being treated that way. He explains that the bastard will only bring bad things to Miss Wu's life, and with that, the girl questions whether the man thinks he is worthy of her. Already out of patience, Xiaofan prepares to get into the car and asks his Uncle Cheng to take care of the other shoulder of the idiot brother. The guy tries to plead for his poor shoulder, but it doesn't go very well since crunchy noises fill the mansion. Chenfeng's brother is sprawled on the floor, whining that they took everything from him and now only thinks about getting revenge with pleasure. Xiaofan tells his father that he is going back to Yanbei, but drops the bomb that he has already found a future son-in-law right there in Yuzhou. Jang Ki comments that the protagonist has changed too much, and he responds curtly, saying that remembering the past is just a waste of time. Our boy dropped a line that left the girl speechless, as if she had lost her place in the script. Man. He stares at the photo of the Harris on his phone while the crazy girl is already freaking out, wanting to know why he changed when he used to swear eternal love. Chenfeng says that all of this is in the past and starts to leave, but Jang Ki holds him back, asking for a little help to get a date with Miss Wu. She guarantees that if he helps, he will get a whole day stuck to her, as long as he doesn't ask for anything absurd like that, right folks? The girl bets that Mu Chenfeng won't resist this tempting offer, as if it were a weight promotion next to the gym. But the protagonist doesn't care and will only agree if there's real money involved because charisma doesn't pay mansion bills. He says that the Jeng family can still profit well from this deal, so it's good to think carefully. The girl gets irritated but accepts the deal and warns that the transfer will hit the account soon. Jang Ki starts to remember a moment when he argued with his father about a certain Xiao Bei who only caused trouble. The guy remembers that his daughter is getting married and then will no longer be part of the Jeng family, and the girl is indignant for not being able to get her daddy's approval. At that moment, the man kicks her out of his office, and she decides to prove that this was the biggest mistake of his life. And for that reason, Jang Ki is determined to get along with the Wu family. Xiaofan calls Chenfeng from inside the car and offers her a ride since it would be quite complicated to get a taxi in that godforsaken place. The girl tries to flirt with him again, but the guy says he is not that type of person, and the odd girl says it would be better if he weren't a person at all. Go figure. After seeing that the money came in, the princess questions whether it was Jang Ki herself who asked for this meeting. The Harris claims she already knew that because the other families are somewhat sexist, and the protagonist comments that it's better not to be prejudiced. She already suggests a marriage between the two, saying that if the boy is part of the Wu family, no one will bother them ever again. Chenfeng doesn't want to continue with this couple's game, but asks if the Wuz would really let him be in charge, and Xiaofan swears she would do anything for that. The protagonist asks the girl to calm down a bit and just give her answer about the meeting. Then the clever girl says she will accept if she receives something in return, and she starts commenting on the boy's physique, reminding him that he sells his skills and not other things. He informs Miss Zhang that the meeting is confirmed, and Xiaofan swears she was eyeing his strength for other reasons, calling the boy to go shopping. Chenfeng is quite the jokester and says that if she isn't interested in other things, then it's not worth it. Oh, the boys talk. Meanwhile, the brother who is more like an enemy is still thinking about his revenge and is going to contact a certain star society. The leader of this society is just chilling, thinking about getting a date with Xiaofan, but of course he intends to pretend that he ran into her by chance. At that moment, an employee informs that Miss Wu was seen in a very intimate situation with a mysterious man, and that they are both at the mall. He reports that this man is Mu Chenfeng, and that his own brother Mu Lei offered 10 million to end the boy's life. Shou, who finds a family feud interesting and says he can confirm the request, but that the payment will have to increase. Chefeng holds the pile of shopping bags from Xiaofan, who doesn't care at all about the state of the protagonist, poor thing. Suddenly, the boy realizes that someone is following them and grabs the girl by the arm, ready to take action. A woman dressed in a very interesting way thinks that the boy's behavior explains her boss's interest and wonders if he can escape. Our boy runs through the streets with the little princess, who is already tired from so much effort and questions if they manage to throw the person off their trail. The sinister girl appears out of nowhere and says no, but explains that she won't do anything against Miss Wu since her target for the day is Mu Chenfeng. Our favorite Harris asks how the Star Society has the audacity to mess with her friends and asks Xiao Hu to go there personally. The mysterious one recounts that someone paid for the protagonist's life and asks not to complicate things, but Saitafan assures that his family won't let it slide. Then the little princess's entourage questions whether it is really necessary to end her affair because of a stranger. She swears that there is no affair at all and that they only saw each other once in their lives, and with that, Chenfeng asks the girl to leave because he will handle the situation. But the spoiled girl wants to help and says that the Star Society is no small matter, which makes her entourage jealous of the attention. The protagonist says that the person capable of defeating him hasn't even been born yet, and Cho Hu wants to see if this dog really bites or just barks. At that moment, the guy fails so badly that he hits the ground, and the young man is even nice enough to say he will stop only at humiliation. The leader of the society gets all angry, but Cheng appears out of nowhere and says that if he causes more trouble, his uncle will be disappointed. On the Tiger Dragon Mountain, a man comments that a master has emerged in Yuzhou, and the other asks if he is worried about his disciples from the Star Society. The bearded man says he sent Cheng to the location, so that shouldn't cause any problems. Then the bald man says to let it go since he discovered a bit more about the Rhino Finger Spirit. The other comments that this is quite a coincidence, as he managed to open 80% of his Ren and Du meridians, and soon he will reach Natural Ki. With that, the two decide to face off in a mobile game, and others around are shocked by the intensity of this battle. Back in the alley, Cheng tells Xeofan to leave with him, explaining that the master and the great uncle already know everything, so the protagonist will be fine. Xiao Hu questions why the hell the master and the uncle care about this guy, then receives a call from a brother. The Mohawk guy feels a bit frustrated while talking on the phone, but then decides to follow what his superiors think is best. He then tries to apologize to the young man and even offers a drink, but Chenfeng says he will only forget this if he knows who paid for his life. The leader of the Star Society tries to explain that he cannot leak client information, but the boy doesn't want to hear it and goes on the attack. After a little shove, Xiao Hu confesses that the client who paid for his end was his brother Mulei. Chenfeng arrives at the Mu mansion kicking the door open, and his grandfather asks what the young master is doing there. He reminds the old man that he promised not to interfere with his plans and wants to know how he will explain having helped Mulei hire the Star Society. Grandpa swears he has nothing to do with it and seems to be indignant, but the protagonist believes it is all an act. Despite this, the old Mu promises that he will provide a satisfactory answer. Mulei is all happy with his glass of wine for having used the family's money to get rid of Chenfeng, but a man suddenly rushes in. He is shocked to learn that the Star Society failed the mission and even spills the glass on the floor. It seems that Grandpa called the grandson for a light conversation, and the guy tries to get away but is dragged out of there. Meanwhile, Lei's mother is conducting some very suspicious chemical experiments and is filled with rage at the thought that a bastard made a fool of her son. She is willing to take risks for some kind of revenge and leaves the room with a bottle in hand. Old Mu questions whether his grandson really hired the Star Society and wants to know how much that service cost. Then the bald man discovers that the guy spent 20 million and took that money from the family's funds. Lei receives a big slap and tries to explain that he only did this because his relatives are all biased towards Chenfeng. The elderly man lets out a manic laugh and says he will deal with his grandson. At that moment, the protective mother enters the room and wants to know who dares to touch her son, but the grandfather tells her to ask what her prince did. The woman doesn't care what he did because he is her precious little boy and challenges the old man to take them both out at once, to which the old man shows that he will not hold back. She opens the bottle and threatens to do something, while the protagonist just watches this little show. The crazy woman pours the liquid from the bottle into Mulei's mouth and says that now they will know what it is like to lose a beloved family member. The elderly man shouts for the staff to call a doctor, but Chenfeng says that is unnecessary because the bastard is his brother. He grabs the guy by the shirt and leaves, saying he wouldn't let anything bad happen to the clueless one, then simply jumps out of the window. In another location, Xiao Hu thinks Mulei is in trouble, and Cheng questions why he believes that. The Mohawk guy explains that it is because Chenfeng is a great master, but the uncle says that the protagonist is no killer, otherwise no one from the Mu family would be alive. With that, the strong man asks if this problem will just go away, and Cheng believes it will. Our boy is with his brother and approaches a stall asking if there is still stinky tofu there. The old man says yes but questions why, and the boy replies that his brother is an idiot who tried to drink pesticide. They prepare to shove that stinky tofu down Mulay's throat, knowing he needs to drink a lot of that stuff. The man makes the angry one drink a lot, thinking that taking pesticide was a foolish move on his part. Our boy notices that the smell of the liquid is very strong and asks if there is any secret ingredient in it, but the guy gets suspicious and just leaves. At that moment, the rest of the family arrives, and the mother wants to know what the hell was given to her son, but Shenfeng reminds her that it was she who gave him pesticide. The protagonist slaps the woman across the face, saying that his brother could be in serious trouble if he doesn't vomit immediately. She is outraged and says that the head of the family will not like this at all, but the boy reminds her that it will be worse for whoever hurt their own child. Our boy asks what his grandfather thinks about this, and the old man orders his staff to lock the woman in the house and take the boy to the hospital. Then the bald man asks his grandson if that was appropriate, and the boy replies that he can do whatever he wants since he is the acting head of the family. Shenfeng thinks that most of his problems have already been solved, and now it is time to teach the little one about the Tao body. The protagonist arrives at the Tian-Er mansion and finds Yulan eating snacks on the couch, as she was bored and decided to binge-watch some series. Our boy calls the girl to go to his room, and upon arriving there, she finds him shirtless, which surprises her. The girl notices the young master's physique and wonders what the hell he is doing, then feels embarrassed thinking it might be something a bit indecent. She asks if she can at least take a shower first, but the boy wants to get straight to the point. Yulan turns red as she confesses that this is her first time doing whatever it is, and Shenfeng assures her that it's okay because everyone goes through this. The girl lies on the bed, and the protagonist asks what she is feeling now. She replies that she hopes he will be gentle since these things can hurt a little. The boy finally realizes what the girl is talking about and questions what the hell is going on in that polluted mind of hers. He explains that he will teach her his skills so that the young woman will never be defenseless again and asks her to focus on her senses now. Then he repeats the question about what she is feeling, and the girl says she is feeling absolutely everything. As expected from someone with a natural dough body, Yulan quickly felt the rhythm of heaven and earth, and Shenfeng tells her to follow the path of her spiritual energy. Now the protagonist eats some chips and understands why the people of Blue Star love this snack so much, as it is even relaxing. Suddenly, he finds an advertisement for a piece of wood that has been struck by lightning for over 1,000 years, so he cannot miss the opportunity to acquire a refinement item. At that moment, he hears a noise and decides to complain to the annoying neighbor who is doing construction, since the girl is meditating and cannot be distracted. The boy knocks on the door of a big guy and remembers that he can only do construction work after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Of course, the guy is not friendly at all and says he might even call the police, but he will continue with his work anyway. Shenfeng notices that his brick is not the best, but the man says it is a handmade brick and that a little knock on the head could send anyone to the grave. That's when the protagonist breaks this handmade brick as if it were made of cornstarch cookies. The big guy threatens to call the police, but the young man gets ahead of him and tells the officer that someone attacked him with a brick at the Tian-Er mansion. Meanwhile, Xiaohu says that this time the bill is all on Cheng, who questions whether he is still worried about money even with the Star Society. The Mohawk guy explains that the thousands of society members need to eat too, and the older guy thinks it's all a matter of silly pride. Then the younger one remembers that he promised not to return to the mountain until he built a great reputation, but the older one says that the other older guy misses him. Xiaohu comments on the 1,000-year-old wood that was struck by lightning 9 times and wants to take some as a birthday gift for the master. The elder remarks that his group already knows and that the wood was bought by the Liuzhen temple, and the other suggests they go together to show respect. Cheng mentions that they need to be careful since the Lotus Flower group is also interested, and Xiaohu just wants to deal with those sect people. Shenfeng also knows that the struck wood was bought by the Liuzhen temple, and thinks it's better to avoid any kind of violence when negotiating with them. The protagonist finds Xiao Hu and Cheng and asks what they are doing there, and the Mohawk guy replies that the guy doesn't own the street. Our young man knows that the two also want a share of the wood, and the uncle asks not to start a fight since he is there for his group and not for the Wu family. But the boy is eager for a fight and starts challenging the others until someone suddenly arrives. Shenfeng informs the Taoist priest that he wants an audience at the temple, and Xiaohu asks if he can get a little favor for being a Taoist too. The priest explains that his master already knows everything and intends to give half of the wood, but how that will be divided among the 3 is their problem. After a brief discussion, the protagonist realizes that the master of the Liuzhen temple is no small matter, as he stepped out of the conflict with just one sentence. The Mohawk guy even wanted to settle the division through violence, but the older one thinks it's better not to irritate the young Mu for being a bit strange. They try to negotiate, and Chenfeng says he wants a 2-meter log, but Xiao, who believes that is absurd and only wants to give a 1-meter log. The protagonist agrees to settle for just 1 meter, and then he notices someone coming. At that moment, the men from the Lotus Flower arrive at the location and say that the wood will all be theirs, although they are surprised by the boy's alert state. Our young man explains that it's not about his alert state, but about the incompetence of the guys, as their breath control is terrible. Xiao, who realizes that 2 of them are great masters and the others are half masters, and thinks that the temple left the whole problem on their shoulders. The Mohawk guy shouts some threats, and one of the guys says he is not afraid of the Jangi group despite their renown. Suddenly, Chenfeng decides to leave without the wood since he doesn't want to get into trouble. But the Mohawk knows that the protagonist just wants to take advantage of the situation and offers 2 more meters of wood, and the clever one asks for half of everything. Our young man warns that he will deal with the 2 great masters, and that the others should take care of the rest of the sect. The bastards think that not even 5 great masters would be enough to take down the 2 at the same time, but the boy delivers a powerful blow. With the men fallen on the ground, the boy believes that these so-called protectors talk too much and do too little. Chenfeng announces that he has finished his part and asks how much longer the others will need. Xiaohu shouts for him to help then, but the protagonist thinks it's a bit unreasonable to ask for help with that attitude. Cheng explains that if the Lotus Flower Sect wins, the boy will also have problems, and that if he helps the guy, he will get an additional 5 million. Our boy is pleased with this new request and springs into action, taking down a bunch of enemy men all at once. Chenfeng reminds them not to forget about their 5 million and to deal with the 2 fallen protectors on the ground by themselves. Xiaohu questions who is stronger when compared to his master and the great uncle, and Cheng thinks that Mu Chenfeng seems to be the strongest. The older man notices that his partner is casually fiddling with his phone and asks him to be careful since there are still people from the Lotus Flower Sect in the area. Xiaohu dodges a strange object and says he won't fall for that trick, but a mysterious person questions whether he can avoid their needle. The Mohawk guy is hit in the shoulder and shouts for Cheng to be careful, as this seems very strange. Lai Sizai is the sacred maiden of the Lotus Flower Sect and claims she has never missed a target. The older man calls her a wicked woman and wants to know if she really thinks no one can control her, to which she asks if he is talking about Chenfeng. The girl comments that it is rare to find such a young expert and invites him to join the Lotus Flower Sect, swearing to fulfill all his wishes. He says that the maiden is not his type, and she laughs upon realizing that the boy is too young to understand what she meant by that. Our boy warns that it's better to forget about this wood, and the woman asks if he really wants to oppose her sect. Chenfeng explains that he needs to do the job since he has already received the money, so he can't let them take the 2 guys. Sissy believes this is a pity since she hasn't even had a taste of the boy, but he thinks it's better that doesn't happen and defends himself from her attack. When his defense ends, the 3 realize that the maiden has simply left the scene. Lai Sizai is already in her fancy car and swears she won't forget Mu Chenfeng, promising that they will see each other again. Now in the center of Yuzhou, suited men are gathered in a room and need to express what they think of the protagonist. A bespectacled guy reflects on the fight against Sissy and believes he has already reached his natural key, but his background is strange as he seems to have appeared out of nowhere. CEO Liu Sheng reminds them that their task is to maintain stability in the southwestern region of the Dragon Kingdom, not to investigate others' backgrounds. The executive will report everything to Yanbai, and now wants Mu Chenfeng to join his company. The protagonist makes several wooden swords float and thinks that he can still release lightning powder, which is enough for now. The boy notices that the same car has been following him since he left the Liaojun temple and wonders if he has become a target once again. Then the suited man with glasses informs the boss that the boy can refine and control artifacts, but he needs to disconnect as he has been discovered. Our boy questions if it's not time for the spy to introduce himself, and the guy explains that he is Hu Hongli from Extra Hour House Services and wants to talk. Chenfeng says he is not interested, but then realizes that the man has a magical artifact and questions who he is. The 4-eyed man states that Extra Hour House Services is a company linked to the Dragon Kingdom, responsible for maintaining social stability. They manage freelancers like the protagonist and deal with various conflicts from the different sects of the Dragon Kingdom. Our boy asks what happens if he refuses, and the other replies that they have technologies and elite specialists, so he shouldn't underestimate their company. Chenfeng acknowledges that the guy is right, and he asks if they can have that conversation now, to which the boy agrees. Now in the center of Yuzhou, Jang Ki greets Miss Wu, who has just arrived at a restaurant. The princess says she needed to come after the other insisted so much, and the girl asks if she wants to add anything to the order. Seofen knows that the young woman had other intentions with this invitation and is already warning that the Wu family will not join the Jang family. For some reason, the girl feels relieved at being rejected, and the Harris comments that it's better not to pressure herself so much. Jang Ki explains that there are some things he cannot control, and the princess asks if one of those things has to do with Mu Chenfeng. The girl states that the protagonist was never part of her plans, and the Harris calls her foolish, as she cannot deny that Chenfeng is very strong. Then Miss Wu comments that the boy is the youngest grandmaster in the Dragon Kingdom, and asks if the other one knew this when she rejected him. Seofen explains that this is why she called her an idiot, as Mu Chenfeng's potential is enormous, and Jang Ki wants to know why she admires the boy so much. The little princess says that her crush has more patience and mental strength than most people, certainly more than Miss Jeng. Our Harris thinks that if the other had half of Chenfeng's patience, most of the Jeng family would already be at her feet. Teofan says that the Wu family would even accept a collaboration, but she doesn't want to join a family of idiots. Jang Ki thanks her for the advice anyway, since Mu Chenfeng was once her cattle, so she thinks she has good chances of success through him. But Miss Wu laughs when she says that the other thinks too highly of herself, and that the protagonist is the man she chose for her life. The little princess says she can guarantee the Wu family's power in her future relationship, and tells the girl to take care of her own life first. Now our boy arrives at the company and thinks the facade is not that impressive, so Hongli reminds him that they do home services, right? Our boy meets the CEO, who informs him that he was already expecting him, and the boy asks what is going on there. The executive tells the boy to make himself at home, and Chenfeng already puts his feet on the table, which leaves the old man somewhat shocked by the audacity. Lu Xing says he won't beat around the bush and explains that he called him there to invite him to be part of his company. The protagonist reads the contract that states 8 hours of work per day, weekends off, holidays off, no overtime, and some benefits. It's true that the salary is just the minimum, but the benefits add a lot to the total. Chenfeng questions if he looks like someone who accepts misery, and the CEO says the boy should be grateful for this job opportunity, unless this is not the real Mu Chenfeng. The young Mu is 20 years old, a bastard son who pursued Jang Ki and was unsuccessful, and a few days ago was taken down by Jang Bai's men. Our boy comments that the investigation was very well done indeed. The executive tells him not to underestimate the power of his company and questions whether he should really call him Mu Chenfeng. Now at the Jang company, Bai tells his father that the so-called person is already under control in Yanbei, so they can start their plan. The boy says that now the Mu family has no chance at all, and the old man tells his son to rest because someone else will take over the job. But the boy worked hard for this and insists on taking the Mu family down to the bottom of the pit personally. His father enjoys seeing all this hatred and agrees to let the boy put on his show, and Bai promises that he will bring the Mu family to ruin in 3 days. The Zheng boy believes that Mu Chenfeng will have to kneel and beg for his mercy. He asks to reserve more rooms upstairs because he is all happy, and his employees thank him. Xiaofan asks her uncle what the protagonist must be doing now. Cheng has no idea but thinks he must be practicing. The little princess thinks he isn't that boring. Girl Wu warns that the Zheng family will act against the Mu family, and the uncle thinks that with Chenfeng around, they can't cause much damage. But the Harris knows that if her crush stays idle, the company won't let it slide, which is why she wants to go there immediately. Cheng believes the company must have already contacted the boy after what happened at the Laojun temple. Now at the company, Lu Sheng asks if the protagonist has thought carefully about his proposal to join his business. The boy explains that he is not Mu Chenfeng but is Mu Chenfeng, and the CEO thinks now is not the best time for jokes. Our boy asks if the guy has ever heard of immortal reincarnation, and the old man almost spills his detox juice upon hearing this. The guy believes this would explain his transformation, and the boy questions whether he really believes in such stories. Sheng says that his company deals with all kinds of oddities, and saying he is a reincarnated immortal seems absurd, but is the best explanation. The protagonist admits that this company is full of talented individuals, and the executive comments that times have changed. Chenfeng reads a report about an explosion that supposedly happened near the Laojun temple, and realizes that this is why the company exists. He is not interested in the proposal because it is impossible to go back in time and just wants to live his life, so he will take down anyone who gets in his way. Sheng says he is 80% convinced that the boy is a reincarnated immortal, and states that his company wants to restore the spiritual veins. The boy knows that restoring such things is not simple, and if they are using this to convince him to join the company, they might as well give up. At that moment, the CEO reveals that this is already his second reincarnation and warns not to underestimate the power of the company because he does not want to reincarnate again. The man thinks that if the protagonist does not care about anything, then he won't mind knowing something. But the boy gets irritated upon learning about Zheng Bai's plan. Sheng says that his company will not let the boy do anything reckless with the Zhengs, and he believes he is being threatened, but the guy just leaves. Hongli explains that his boss only meant that the company can help the Mu family with this crisis, but only if Chen Feng cooperates. The protagonist says he can join the company but needs to have freedom, and not a single cent of his salary can be missing. Then the manager says that an intern has those rights, and after signing the contract, he can take his people from Yanbei. Chen Feng wants to know about the intern thing, so Hongli explains that it is a more informal role that does not require working every day. Our boy thinks that all of this was already planned, and then asks what the plans are for the Zheng family's trade war. The guy says that the company's priority is to ensure the safety of the Mu family members, and the boy believes he has been deceived with this contract. Chen appears out of nowhere asking to be allowed to handle this trade war situation. Chen Feng questions what the girl is doing there, and the Harris tells him that the Wu family also owns part of the company. Now that the protagonist is her employee, the girl asks if it wouldn't be an office romance if they started dating. Oh my. The princess says that the company can guarantee the safety of the Mu family, and she can protect all their assets from the Zheng family as well. Our boy thanks her for the help, and Miss Wu reminds him that he was the one who chose to be by her side, so of course she would help him. Xiaofan teases Hongli and makes the man leave awkwardly, calling the girl director. Chen Feng asks if the girl knows where Jang Bai is, and she replies that he must be in a place known as Heaven on Earth. The protagonist runs off, and the Harris asks him not to do anything reckless, or it will be difficult for her company, but the boy swears he knows his limits. Now in front of Heaven on Earth, the boy finds his enemy near some cars that must be worth a fortune. Our boy questions if he is to blame for what happened in Yanbei, and a thug tells them to take care of the boy who went after the young master. But Chen Feng has a terrifying look as he says he will take care of them first, and the guys are left speechless. He repeats the question, and Jang Bai responds that it was indeed his fault, and he might even consider being nice if the protagonist kneels and begs for forgiveness. But the boy kicks the thug and questions if he ever gave him permission to speak. Our boy says it is now the thug's turn. He even tries to play nice, but receives a solid brick to the head. Then the boy asks young Master Jeng if all of this was his idea or his father's, and the scoundrel is too busy complaining about his knee. Chen Feng slaps the man, who swears that he wouldn't dare send him to the grave, but then receives another slap. Jang Bai says that it is better to finish him off quickly since he knows where his family's property is, and someone shouts Mu Chen Feng's name. Jang Ki appears out of nowhere and does not seem happy to see his little brother in trouble. Chen Feng slaps the fool again, and Jang Ki runs to help his little brother. The girl believes she was mistaken about the protagonist, and he laughs, saying he doesn't touch women. Then the girl says that if the boy does not apologize, he will never see her again, and the boy comments that she really thinks highly of herself. Our boy says that the young woman should be grateful for not being involved, otherwise she would have been in trouble, and Jang Ki shouts that he will regret this one day. From the car, Hongli informs his boss that Chen Feng did not worsen the situation, and then states that he will resolve the Yanbei issue immediately. Jang Ki is at the hospital with his brother and says that his recovery will take 3 days, and Jang Bai can hardly believe he is laid up right now. She wants to know what happened for the protagonist to act this way, but the jerk shouts for his sister to leave because a woman wouldn't understand the situation. The girl reminds him that they are siblings, and the guy says that when she gets married, she will no longer be part of the family, so she should know her place. Jang Ki feels frustrated for being treated this way just for being a woman, and then remembers what Xiaofan said at the restaurant. The girl smiles again and says that she will always be part of the Zheng family, and her brother thinks this is just empty talk. Suddenly, their father enters the room and tells his daughter to leave, and the young woman pretends to be obedient and comments that she will do as asked. Mr. Jeng slaps his son again and asks what happened. Then Bai simply says that he wants to see Mu Chenfeng destroyed. But the old man says that the Star Society refused the job, and the boy is shocked, thinking that his father must have been stingy. The man slaps the boy again because of his rebellion. He believes that Chenfeng must have connections in the Star Society, but says that it doesn't matter because he has already set his plan in motion. The protagonist explains that the sword follows the eyes, the hand follows the sword, and the waist follows the hand. Only then can it be graceful and fluid. Yulan remembers this but finds it a bit strange to be so close to the boy, so he tells her to stop getting distracted with that polluted mind. The girl wants to know why she needs to learn this, and the boy explains that it's for self-defense, so that no one can bother her again. Yulan thinks that's pretty cool. Suddenly, someone screams that they were electrocuted in the shower because the water was turned off, and Chenfeng says they need to get out of there. The protagonist realizes he had never noticed the beauty of this girl. She tries to say something, but the boy asks her not to say anything right now. The two get closer in that atmosphere, and the girl thinks she will do what the young master wants. But then the boy's phone starts ringing and ruins everything. What terrible luck, huh? Yulan runs out, all embarrassed, and tells the boy to take care of his business. Chenfeng comments that his grandfather better have a good reason for calling, and the old man warns that he needs to return to the mansion immediately. The protagonist goes to the family house and asks for an explanation. Then the bald man asks if his grandson put Jang Bai in the hospital the day before. Our boy says that was still too little, and his stepmother starts to nag, and then he remembers that the woman should be locked in her room. The boy questions if his grandfather is playing games, and the old man bangs his cane on the floor and comments that he needs to pay for his mistakes. His brother tells him that the company's stocks have fallen so much that their father is under the control of the Zhengs in Yanbei, and shouts that it's all his fault. The annoying one says that even being useless, he would never do something so irresponsible, and thinks that now he will get his revenge. Then other family members also start saying that Chen Feng is ruining everything and shouldn't even be part of this family anymore. Old Mu asks if his grandson has anything to say, but the protagonist wants to know why they are making such a drama. Xiaofan comments that the Zheng family played dirty, and if it continues like this, the Mus will be bankrupt by the end of the afternoon. She calls an aunt and informs her that she can start now. Then Cheng asks if it's a bit clueless to use her resources because of the Mu family. The little princess explains that she is doing this for Chen Feng and not for the rest of the family, then decides to go to the mansion to help her crush. Meanwhile, the protagonist says that his useless relatives have made a mess of the Mu name, so he won't take all the blame for what happened. His brother charges at him, but ends up getting slapped, and the boy questions if he forgot the pain he felt now that he is almost healed. Our boy delivers a kick that sends his brother flying. Mu Lei tries to cry to Grandpa, saying that this was an affront to his authority, but the old man just tells him to shut up. The old man asks if this is how the boy treats his family, and Chen Feng remembers that he was never treated as part of the family anyway. His grandfather orders him to go to the Zhengs and bait on his knees, but the protagonist prefers to leave rather than waste his time. The bald man says he has a few tricks up his sleeve and presses a button that calls a bunch of security guards, but the young man doesn't care about his cheap tricks. Then the grandfather decides that his grandson will only leave this mansion if it's to go to the Zheng family. At that moment, Xiaofan walks through the door and comments that the old man shouldn't act this way towards a young person. Old Mu starts to force sympathy because he knows the Mu family can solve his problem, and the little princess swears that one day she will be part of the family too. Mu Lei tries to remind his grandfather that the one to blame for everything is Chen Feng, and the protagonist says that if they keep being cute, he will resort to ignorance. The heiress asks her crush not to be stubborn and to remember his other identity, and the young man knows that he is now also part of the company. Our boy asks how much the shares of the Mu company are worth because he wants to buy everything, and the grandfather says it's impossible since they are worth 2 billion. The boy offers 3 billion for everything, and his brother thinks he is an idiot for believing he can arrange all of this. Chen Feng asks Xiaofan for a loan and swears he will do anything in return for this favor, but the girl prefers to donate rather than lend. 4 billion drops into the young man's account, and he asks them to sign the contract now. Chen Feng signs the contract, and now the Mu Corporation is all his, so he doesn't want to be bothered by the family anymore. His brother thinks he is being foolish for buying a failing company, and his grandfather knows that 3 billion is more than enough for a great life. Mu Lei comments that Miss Wu wouldn't lose so much money if she had chosen the right brother, but she calls him an idiot and doesn't want to hear it. Old Mu asks if the heiress isn't tired of watching this whole show, and the girl smiles as she says she can't leave before the end. At that moment, an employee informs them that the shares of the Mu Corporation have started to rise again and should reach 50 billion on the same day. The grandfather and his grandson are shocked, and Xiaofan laughs while commenting that the fools sold a 50 billion company for just 3. Chen Feng prepares to leave with his friend, and the bald man tries to argue in favor of the family, but the protagonist simply says he will change everyone in the company since he can't spend on useless people. Elsewhere, Jang Ki informs her father that something terrible has happened, but the man doesn't care about what his daughter has to say. She warns that their shares are falling and that they have already lost 30 million, and Mr. Zhang can hardly believe it since the Mu family doesn't have that power. The girl tries to calm her father, but the man resorts to violence and calls her useless, since she couldn't even handle the little girl from the Wu family. The old man leaves saying he doesn't want to hear excuses, and Jang Ki feels frustrated because she knows she is treated this way just for being a woman. Jang Bai comments that his sister should focus on getting married, but she wants to give her all to her family and the corporation even without any recognition. In the hospital corridor, the young woman calls Mu Chenfeng and says she wants to meet him. The protagonist finds it strange that the girl asked for a meeting and questions whether she took some weird medicine that day. He thanks the girl for the control she has over the Mu family, and Jang Ki asks what he gave in exchange for Xofan's help. Our young man finds it bizarre that they draw these conclusions since friends help each other, but the young woman believes that people like them can't have friends. The boy thinks it's normal for a dishonest person not to have friends, and suddenly the girl asks him to be her boyfriend. She swears that if Chenfeng spares her family, she will be his girlfriend, and the protagonist questions if that is really her proposal. Jang Ki asks what else he could want, and the young man finds it pathetic that the girl comes to beg when it was her family that started all of this. Our boy turns his back and tells her not to contact him, but the girl promises to give anything in exchange for the well-being of her family. The boy questions if she can really do that, and then asks for 51% of the shares of the Jeng Corporation, but the girl thinks that's too much. Chenfeng leaves, saying to only speak with him when he has some authority within the Jeng family. Princess Wu feels somewhat frustrated to learn that Jang Ki has arranged a meeting with Chenfeng. Lu Sheng asks if the girl is not worried about this, but she wants to know if Uncle Mu has been rescued, and the CEO says yes. With that, the Harris feels relieved, and the executive questions whether all his efforts would be in vain if the protagonist reconciles with the Zhengs. The girl asks what the young man is doing, and the man replies that he is walking in the park with another girl, but he also mentions that his father is furious. She often doesn't care because it's just a matter of time before the must reconcile with the Zhengs. She gets angry that Chenfeng is meeting another woman and can't wait to see what her father will do when he returns. Suddenly, the manager warns that the Jeng Corporation has contacted the Lotus Flower Sect and things could spiral out of control because of this. The men say they will try to resolve the situation, and the princess questions what would happen if things really got out of control. Lu Sheng says that they would then have to take special measures, as the balance of the Dragon Kingdom cannot be broken under any circumstances. Meanwhile, Mr. Zhang asks for help from someone named Liu regarding his company's shares and explains that the Mus are behind this, but they hang up on him. He becomes furious because as soon as the Liu family got involved, all his false friends abandoned him, and he decides that there is only one solution to this problem. The man speaks with old Wang and says he will accept his proposal and take Jang Ki to meet his son. Then a woman approaches. Sissy comments that Mr. Zhang made an effort to get in touch and says that her price is high, but the old man is willing to pay for the sacred maiden. The woman begins to act very professionally and questions how much the man thinks she is worth, seeming to confuse the type of service. He offers 50 million to never see the Mu family, not even in gold, but the girl wants a bit more because the job is risky. The man asks how much she wants and is somewhat shocked to find out they are talking about 200 million. But actually, Sissy wants even more, saying that for 2 billion, the Lotus Flower Sect will rid itself of the Mu family once and for all. Then the woman offers some more shady services in exchange for his own life, and Mr. Zhang thinks the maiden is joking. She leaves the place saying that if the money is transferred that same night, her sect will start acting the next morning. Jang Ki comments to her father that they do not need to agree to the Wang family's conditions. The man says she is in charge and mentions that a price must be paid for money and power, or else one will end up serving tables like the waitress. 2 men arrive at the restaurant, and one of them greets old Jeng. He comments that Jang Ki has grown quite a bit, and the girl says hello to the man and his son, who still seems a bit lost. Wang Zizong finally greets the others in a somewhat shy manner. Suddenly, the waitress spills some tea on the young man's shirt, but he doesn't mind and says it's no problem. He knows that the employee wouldn't be able to pay for that shirt even if she worked for an entire year, so there's no need to make a fuss. Moreover, people might get upset if that goes too far, and the boy believes his life is worth more than that of the waitress. Mr. Zhang comments that old Wang raised his son well, and the man says that the stars of the night are the young people. Zizong says he is very satisfied with Miss Zhang and reminds her that he wants 51% of the corporation's shares. Her father questions whether that isn't too much. The boy knows it isn't, as the Wang family is the only one willing to help the Zhengs. He says the minimum he can accept is 40%, but then the young woman freaks out and says she never agreed to marry, to her father's despair. Jang Ki swears she knows exactly what she is doing and refuses to marry the young man, deciding that she will carve her own path. She contacts Chenfeng and asks to talk once more. The girl knows she cannot rely on anyone else and promises that she knows what she is doing when her brother questions her. Bai asks if she went to meet the protagonist, but the young woman says that it's none of her business. At that moment, our boy knocks on the door and is surprised to see that the girl has just come out of the shower. Jang Ki invites the boy to have some wine, and he questions if she has changed her mind. Then she says she can guarantee 10% of the shares. The boy asks if that is possible, and the girl says yes, if he helps her. Chenfeng thinks he will be at a disadvantage if he only gets 10% for helping her control the Zhang family and fix the financial crisis. But the young woman puts the cards on the table and questions whether he will still be at a disadvantage if she is included in the payment, What a situation, huh? Chenfeng wants to know what kind of madness Jang Ki is up to, and the girl assures him that she is included in his reward. The protagonist comments that the girl is playing with fire, and she gives him a big kiss, saying that she is indeed playing with fire. Our boy says that the least he can accept is 20%, and the young woman agrees to this deal. After the action, the boy comments that he didn't know it was her first time, and the girl swears that she is not promiscuous. Chenfeng asks if her father knows about this, but the girl says she has already given up on everyone in her family. She tells the boy not to forget what he promised, and he says that they have already made up. But Jang Ki asks the protagonist not to leave and gives him another kiss, oh boy. After trying to talk to his daughter and failing, Mr. Zhang apologizes for the young woman and comments that she is a bit immature. Zizong says it's alright, but that next time the conditions will be a little different. The old man gets angry at the Wangs, but then receives the news that the 2 billion has already been transferred. In the suburbs of Yuzhou, Sissy also realizes that the money has already hit the account and comments that they can now start the work. A hooded man asks if the young lady is sure she wants to attack the Mu family, and she reminds him that they only have Chenfeng. But the honorary leader of the Mu sect, Zhou, reminds them that they have already lost 2 protectors because of this guy. Sissy recounts that they were chased from Yanbei to Yuzhou, and the fate of their true leader is still a mystery. The woman knows they need money and asks if the boy has a better idea. Then he says he doesn't think it's a good idea to go against Chenfeng. With a frightening aura, the young lady reminds him that if the boy is not capable of leading the Lotus Flower Sect, he will be dragged along. The next day, the protagonist acknowledges that Jang Ki has changed so much that he can no longer resist her charm. Now he realizes that the Mu family is completely vulnerable and decides to return to the company immediately. He returns to the company building, and Hu Hongli is waiting for him and asks how he spent the night. Chenfeng gets all defensive, thinking that he was being monitored, but the man replies that there was nothing to worry about. Chen still didn't know. Thus, Chenfeng says that his family is in the crosshairs of the Lotus Sect and needs help. But it seemed they were faster than he expected. A team had already been chosen that morning. He is happy to see the chosen ones, and Hu Hongli says it is the company's responsibility to keep the families of its workers safe. The young man asks about Xeofan, but it seems that as soon as she learned about Mu Yuanda's flight schedule, she had left. At that moment, he stands up and asks what time the landing would be. By the time, it probably had already landed, but he didn't need to worry. He had already sent a team to pick up his father. In the car driving through the city, Xiaofan and Mu Yuanda were talking. She said that everything had gone well thanks to his son, but the man was suspicious. He knew his child well. Even so, she insists, and then he asks how the two had met. Awkwardly, she begins to tell, but suddenly the car makes a sharp turn. It seems someone was arriving. He didn't expect them to be so fast. It was better to hold on, as he would step on the gas from now on. The driver evades the other car, but when looking in the rearview mirror, a motorcycle had appeared. She throws some needles in the direction of the car, and the tires are punctured. Cheng then positions himself in front of the two and asks them to get out of there quickly. Sizzy takes off her helmet, and Cheng finds it strange. He didn't remember the Mu family having anything against her. Xiaofan then says that they are from the White Lotus and are after Mu Yuanda. Well, Sizzy couldn't do anything if Chief Jeng was offering 2 billion for his head, but it had nothing to do with the Wu family, so it was better for the girl not to move. Only she didn't care after all. Her family didn't fear a handful of rats. That said, she shouts calling for Xiaohu. A jeep approaches and a gang arrives at the scene. It was Xiaohu, and it had been a while since he had seen Sizzy. She mocks them, saying they would need more people if they wanted to stop her. He and Cheng then team up to attack and tell the others to escort Xeofan. Last time they had been caught off guard. Now they wouldn't let her escape. Sizzy stands up and throws her first punch, but despite being good at martial arts, if she missed, it wouldn't matter, Xiaohu says. And while he attacked from above, Cheng was attacking from below. Even so, she manages to dodge. Taking advantage of her being in the air, he goes for the attack. But Cheng tries to stop him, only it was too late. He falls defeated, and then the driver attacks her. But Sizzy not only defends herself, but also strikes back at him. Even so, both still remained on guard. Seeing that the two hadn't left yet, he shouts for them to run away quickly, but she wouldn't let them escape that easily. But just as the needles were about to hit Xiaofan, something gets in the way. Chenfeng had arrived, and he would make her pay for messing with his family. However, she says she was just a mercenary. If he wanted to blame someone, he should blame the Zhengs. But Sizzy could rest easy. After defeating her, she would go after him. Cheng warns him about the enemy's needles, but he knew how to play that game too, and for the first time in that fight, she was hit. She is startled to discover that he was also a spiritual master, and then decides to retreat for now. But he wouldn't let her escape that easily. To throw him off, Sizzy makes an attack on Mu Yuanda and Xiaofeng, and while defending the two, she really manages to escape. From a distance, Muju watched everything. He hadn't expected a spiritual master to appear, at least not in this era. Seeing the boy's ability, Mu Yuanda asks if he is really his son, but he ignores him and goes straight to pull Xiaofen's ear. She says that despite everything, she still wanted to be useful to him. Seeing that conversation, the man becomes confused, and as the girl comes crying to him, his protective mode activates. Without thinking twice, he starts attacking Chenfeng. Watching the two fight, the girl laughs, saying he deserved it for going to meet Jang Ki. Her father knew he wasn't hurting him, so he asks his son to put on a show for his pride, and he does. Mu Yuanda comes back and says that if she needs anything, just say so, and he'll take care of Chenfeng. Xiaofen then thanks him. She was feeling avenged now. When he fights with the two to keep them from straying too far, she puts on another scene, and her father gets him again. Chenfeng apologizes to her. The girl was clearly enjoying that. Her father then pulls him aside, saying if he wanted to jump the fence, at least don't get caught. At first, the young man is startled, but then he remembers that his father brought women home. Even so, the old man tries to give him a moral lesson about being responsible. But at that moment, he really wasn't in the right mindset to deal with that. Mu Yuanda then goes back to the annoying Xiaofan, and the two grown men stay behind, each dealing with that information in their own way. He takes the moment to try to talk to Xiaohu, but the guy didn't seem very willing to talk to him. Chenfeng then says he could pay for information about a certain someone. Even though he was part of the academy, there were things he still didn't have access to. Xiaohu tells him to stop joking. If it weren't for Xiaofen, he would never see him. Since he didn't want to answer, there were other ways to get that information, so it was better for him to think carefully. Chenfeng prepares another attack, and seeing his power, the redhead says he would tell him everything he knew. But Muju makes his entrance, drawing their attention, and he introduces himself as the leader of the White Lotus. Chenfeng gets ready. The people from that group were indeed persistent. Only he had misunderstood everything. Mujo says that actually, they were in the same boat. Chenfeng takes the card, and it seems that address was where Sizi would be. He then asks why he should trust him. After all, it could be a trap. And the boy says that actually, the Lotus was divided into two factions. The most radical side was led by Sizi, and they saw the Mu as a problem. But his side thought differently. The organization needed new air. That's why he wanted to join forces with him to defeat her. The address he had given was an offer to form a partnership. However, just as he was about to say goodbye, Chenfeng struck him, throwing the boy to the ground. He asked why the other had done that. He didn't want to go to war with him. But Chenfeng didn't care about that. Just a moment ago, the other was about to turn his back and walk away. Muju looked at him confused. He saw no problem with that. However, the older one said that in this world, strength and influence were essential. If he wanted to form an alliance with him, he would have to show what he was capable of. The young man admitted he hadn't thought of it that way and apologized. But instead of fighting, the next time he encountered him, he would tell him a secret about the spiritual training of the White Lotus, which is passed down from generation to generation. That said, he tried to leave again, but the other stopped him. His gang had been disturbing his peace for quite some time. Therefore, he also wanted a hefty payment for all that stress. Muju turned and said it was better for him to stop acting funny, but since he didn't want to pay, instead he could accompany him to the company for tea. The boy then threw a card at him, but Chenfeng continued talking about the company. He saw talent in that kid. Besides that, he wanted to know more about the White Lotus. Xiaohu asked why he had extorted the kid, but he said it was an investment. 10,000 today would be 30,000 tomorrow, but he didn't want to waste more breath on him. At Tian, Erhuafu's residence, Yulan was training on the roof. Upon seeing the girl, he had to admit she had evolved quite a bit since the last time. It surely wouldn't be long before she became a grandmaster. She was so focused that she didn't even notice Chenfeng approaching from behind. He said that the girl needed to improve a few things and asked her to follow him. Yulan felt a bit embarrassed. It seemed there was always something more to improve. But he said she had nothing to worry about. She was doing very well. Excited, she said she could hardly wait for the day she could fight alongside him. Well, as soon as she specialized a bit more, she would definitely travel the world with him. No matter how dangerous it was, she would make a point of being by his side. From inside a luxury car, Mulei and his mother got out, looking for Yulan. It seemed that she and Chenfeng had been quite close lately. The woman said she didn't care about that. She just wanted to resolve things and leave quickly. Upon reaching the floor and coming face to face with the two, they immediately started wanting to settle scores. But that matter had been explained a long time ago, Chenfeng said. Even so, the woman insisted, saying it was better for him to show respect to his elders. He pretended to be ignorant, ignoring the woman, but Yulan called them in. However, Chenfeng didn't agree with any of that. Mulei's mother then tried to use her title to make him shut up, but threats didn't work on him. After all, neither of them could take him down. Even so, the guy tried to pick a fight with him, but Yulan wasn't going to listen to all that nonsense in silence. The girl went up to him and gave him not just one, but 2 slaps to the face with gusto. Immediately, the whiny baby ran to his mother. Instead of confronting the girl, she went straight for Chenfeng. He hadn't expected Yulan to act that way. He liked the girl's attitude. Well, since they wanted to act tough, it was time to silence both of them. The woman was startled when she saw he was taking them to the window, but Chenfeng said she could relax. He wasn't going to end their lives. That was just the quickest route to the ground floor. Once down, he asked the driver to take them safely. The two troublemakers had fainted from shock. They then said their goodbyes, but unintentionally. He had also traumatized the driver when he jumped from the 16th floor without getting hurt while carrying two people. Koi Yuling asked if they would really be okay, and he replied that yes, they would just be in shock for a while. Moreover, the Mu family had fallen into the hands of the two, who knew what they could do. Saying goodbye to the girl, he got into the taxi and headed to the address he had received earlier. When he arrived at the location, it was already dark. It seemed that Mu Zhao had told the truth. Sizi was indeed inside that building. The White Lotus was truly full of snakes. It seemed that the head of the Zheng family was irritated with her, but there wasn't much the assassin could do. The Mu had hired a security company. Jang Bai was pressuring her. They were running out of time. It was better for her to finish the job quickly. If not, they would demand that she cover the costs they were incurring, no matter how. Sissy then said he had 5 seconds to remove his hand. Her father, who was giving her a hard time, was dealing with an assassin, not just any woman. Even so, his son maintained a sexist attitude, forcing the old man to formally apologize to her and making him do the same. And Sissy expected nothing less. In her past, the former master of the White Lotus had chosen her as his partner, but it hadn't been a mutual choice. Sissy definitely didn't want it. Even so, she was forced to stand by his side until she was able to take the gang for herself. She asked the guy if he liked the view he was getting, and it was better to answer if he didn't want to stop breathing. Trembling, he replied that she was beautiful and wouldn't dare contest her again. Fearing what she was capable of, the old man offered her a good sum to let this one slide, but Sissy found the amount insufficient. As soon as he increased the offer, she accepted and asked him to keep his son on a leash. It was better that he didn't dare make any more of those kinds of jokes again, she said, hitting him with one of her needles. Chief Jeng was upset because they had already reached an agreement, but she had promised not to finish him off. A little injury like that was nothing. He could rest easy. The boy would just be without his toy for a while, she said, leaving the old man incredulous. Chenfeng had to admit he liked a bit of the cruelty she had, but in the midst of his thoughts, he saw a car approaching. Wondering who it could be at that hour, he ended up seeing Jang Ki getting out of the car. It seemed she had tracked Zheng Bai's phone. He better have explanations. One of the servants came to inform that a woman had arrived, but the rules were clear. If someone showed up, it was just to take care of it. However, upon seeing the woman on the screen, Chief Jang panicked and said that she was his daughter. Well, it seemed he shared things well within the family then. But at the same moment, Jang Ki arrived saying it wasn't his fault. She had tracked both their phones. Sissy liked the way the girl carried herself. She was definitely better than that weakling. Her father punished her, saying she didn't know what she was doing. But in reality, she did know. She then introduced herself to Sissy and said she would like to work in cooperation with her. If the woman accepted, she would give 10% of the family's annual profit to her. Sissy then introduced herself and said the offer was quite tempting, but she could still finish off the girl and take the entire corporation for herself. Chief Jang tried to negotiate with her again. He didn't want to lose his daughter, and like the trash father he was, he punished the girl again and told her to take her brother to the hospital. It was better she didn't get involved in men's business. Despite all her efforts, her father couldn't trust her just because she was a woman. Since that was the case, she would do as he ordered. But even her brother mocked her, saying she was walking too slowly. At that moment, Jang Ki lost the rest of her sanity. She grabbed an object and hit her brother. Now at least her father would pay attention to her. While Chief Jang was shocked, Sissy applauded the girl. He ran to his son while she, in tears, said there was nothing for her father to worry about. She would manage the family well and give her best in place of her brother. Sissy took the opportunity to make a counteroffer to her, inviting the girl to the White Lotus. Chief Jang interrupted and said he wanted to cut ties with her, but the woman said he could go, but the girl should stay. Now he really had a problem. Jang Ki was his wife, and he couldn't let her join the organization, so he entered the building. He asked Sissy to release her. The guy had already lost his son. He couldn't lose his daughter too. At least he could show him a bit of mercy. Despite his speech, Sissy wanted to know what he was doing there. Well, she was the one who started the fight first, so it was only fair that he retaliated. Sissy plays her game, wanting to know if he was really capable of eliminating a woman like her. But Chenfeng corrects her, saying that now he was part of the company and had to follow its rules. He just wanted to take the money that Zheng had paid her and take her into custody. After all, he didn't want another small fish coming after him to cause trouble. Sissy was curious to know what he would do if she didn't give him the money. Having entered his lair alone, he should have known that he wouldn't get out so easily. Chenfeng then decides to make a small demonstration of his power, making Sissy swallow hard. He asks her if she didn't find it a bit strange that he had found her on the same day. And at that moment, she thinks of Mujio. As she had discovered, he says that the boy had passed the address to him. But he didn't want to fight. She just had to agree to go to the company to answer a few questions, and then she would be free. Sissy then reminds him that the one who put the Muse's safety at risk was right behind him. But Chenfeng says that he had already been punished enough with the loss of his son, and that had been done at the hands of Jang Ki. She had to admit that he knew how to manipulate things well. He had control over the Mu, now the Jeng, and was still part of the company. This piqued her interest, so she would play his game, she says, dismissing her subordinates. Sissy asks what he would do about the Jeng, but all they could do now was give them time. With his child in his arms, the CEO says that upon assuming her position, the girl would have to deal with a much darker world than she expected. But she wasn't afraid. She knew what she wanted. Even so, the old man says that not everything was money and privileges in that position. She would have to face several lions for days. Every morning, he wakes up thinking about how to deal with the leeches that lurk, waiting for his downfall. He always wanted to protect his family, and he knew she was better than Jang Bai. But thinking about seeing his little girl carry that burden, he couldn't. But now there was nothing more to be done. Everything was out of his control. Jang Ki is moved upon hearing her father's words. He knew she would give her best. He just preferred that his girl didn't have to deal with that. Tomorrow he would announce Jang Bai's death and officially transfer the leadership to her. He beats himself up, saying that he had failed as a father and picks up his child. As he leaves, Jang Ki reinforces that she would be the best leader the Jang family ever had. If her father had one more piece of advice to give her, it was that Chenfeng was strong. She had to make sure to keep him by her side, since they were together. That said, he leaves, leaving the girl behind. But soon after, Chenfeng arrives by car to give her a ride. However, she declines, needing some time alone. He then leaves, and Sissy asks if it was really okay to leave her there. But he says that Jang Ki was strong. She didn't need to worry. Sissy changes the subject and asks what he wanted to know so badly. He then questions her about the spiritual energy of the blue star. At that moment, Sissy halts. That was a secret of the Wudang Dragon and the Qingqing sect. Why was he asking her about it? Well, if he asked them directly, they wouldn't answer. He thought someone from the White Lotus might know. Sissy says it wouldn't help to ask her. She really didn't know. He replies that he could pass on other information then. The White Lotus sect derives from the Lotus spiritual path. The founder ascended and left the blue star. He returned and shattered the dragon's veins. At first, the impact on the spiritual world wasn't felt, but after 2,000 years, it became clear how much the energy had diminished. It didn't make sense to attack the dragon's veins. Why had he done that? Well, that was all she knew. Maybe the Zhenyi sect knew more. They had finally arrived at the company, and Hu Hongli comes to greet them. Chenfeng then introduces Sissy to him. He praises the young man's work and takes Sissy by the arm to lead her away. The young man says that she had come of her own accord. There was no need to use force. He then turns and says that Director Liu was waiting for Chenfeng in his office. Upon arriving in the boss's office, he says he wanted to resolve things quickly so he could go home. The old man then tells him to sit and accept a cup of tea. It would be brief. He tries to make a joke, but soon the subject of the conversation changes, and he hands over a folder with the plans for Xuanling's 100th birthday party. However, the Zhenyi sect was not their territory, as they would cover this event. Upon looking at the list, he discovered there were more important guests than he expected. It seems that the heads of some families and from the Dragon Country would be present, and what the company wants is always to maintain stability among everyone. They trusted him for that. Chenfeng wanted to know if that was permission for him to act if necessary, and Director Liu said that if he wanted, he could feel free. Even so, it was important for him to follow the company's rules. In other words, as long as no one stopped breathing altogether, everything was fine. Exactly, that was the only limit. He said that the director knew his true intentions because he was spending so much on him. But the old man cut him off. There was no point in trying to negotiate. Chenfeng had just gotten out of the mess with the Mu family. The rest was just letting the company handle it. Moreover, he would only have help from those assigned to the mission. Xiaofan would be out this time. He accepted the job and said he would like to know about his partners in no more than 3 days. In the Wang family's room, the news about Jang Bai had already arrived. Although they said it was due to a car accident, someone mentioned it was actually a stabbing, which made him think about the family having internal problems. Well, soon they would crumble. The old man had bet on his son and was now left with no one. Wang Zizong stood up, intending to offer his condolences to Jang Ki. As expected of his son, always thinking ahead of his time, if he won her over, the company would also be his. The boy was feeling flattered. He really wanted to have Jang Ki and the Jeng company in the palm of his hand. The next day at the Jeng mansion, Wang Zizong was offering his condolences, and he took the opportunity to ask the woman out. He would make a point of listening to her. She thanked him but declined the invitation. She wanted to be there for her family. Besides, she had other guests to receive. Seeing the two together soured Chenfeng's mood a bit. He didn't like that guy. Jang Ki was surprised to see them there. She hadn't expected their presence. He then said he had come to pay his respects to her brother and to say he would keep his promise. Wang Zizhong tried to strike up a conversation with him, praising what he had done with the Mu family, and Chenfeng responded mockingly, clearly irritating the other. He already had Wu Xiaofan, so he would have to leave Jang Ki to him. Since that was the case, the young man asked how long he had been interested in her, and he started talking a bunch of nonsense about love at first sight and how perfect they were for each other. That said, Chenfeng decided to share a secret and mentioned that the girl had a floral birthmark on her thigh. He would let him imagine how he knew that and wished him good luck. As soon as they left, Wang Zizhong freaked out. What an embarrassment he had gone through. Kui Yuling asked if it was right for them to be there. The two families had never gotten along, but he had gone there only because of one person and she had returned. Jang Ki had brought the documents for him to sign. He checked and asked the girl next to him for the contract response. As soon as she signed, 10% of the Mu family would belong to her. Both hoped that these contracts would last for a long time. They both signed. Even though the Mu family was larger than the Jeng, it was always good to bring more people into the family. Better friends than enemies. Upon hearing the word friends, Jang Ki was moved. But she composed herself and asked if Kui Yuling would also accompany him on the trips. He replied that yes, despite her age, she was progressing well in training. However, with his answer, she ended up misinterpreting things unintentionally. Chief Jang Cheng asked to have a word with Mu Chenfeng. As it would be a private matter, he asked Kui Yuling to wait in the car. The young man had spent so many years as an illegitimate son. It was incredible to see his rise. He had to admit he once thought about how lucky Mu was to have him as a son. But this sentimental talk wouldn't work. He could get straight to the point. Well, the concern for his daughter was obvious, so he wanted to make sure that everything that happened between the families was in the past. As long as they didn't have future problems, everything was fine. They had just signed a contract where they divided 10% of the Mu profits. The old man then promised that as long as he was alive, the two families would always be friends. Chenfeng was happy to hear those words, but he needed to go. But he had one more request, to never leave his daughter behind. Well, for now he could guarantee that, but the future belongs only to God. He goes back to the car and informs Kui Yuling that in 10 days she would leave with him for Jangi. He just needed to ask for permission from Director Liu. The girl is happy to hear that. She has always wanted to accompany her master. Meanwhile, in another car, Wang Zizhong was having a fit of rage. He felt humiliated by what Chenfeng had said. He wanted both of their heads now. He calls someone named Sima's son and asks for help to get some information. It seems the boy was a top-notch hacker and the two had known each other for a while. Upon seeing who the job was about, he becomes a bit scared after all. Mu Chenfeng was part of the company. It wouldn't be that simple. The Sima family also had an agreement with the company, so he would have problems if he did this. It was better for Wang Zizhong to forget about it. That company wasn't known by all families for nothing. But then the young man offers him 3 million and a visit from a certain actress he liked. Immediately he gets excited about the idea. He would give his best, but he couldn't promise anything. He then tells his mother that he would travel a little earlier. She doesn't like the idea much, but there's nothing she can do. 2 days later, Chenfeng and Yulan had arrived at the airport. Even though the celebration was a month away, it was always good to be prepared. But while they were talking, he ends up noticing that they were being watched. He hands the bags to the girl and asks her to go ahead. It probably wouldn't take long. It should be someone familiar. Who was following them was Xiao Fan. The girl wanted to know where her fiancé was going, but suddenly he appears behind her. Chenfeng asks what she was doing there, and upon seeing him, the girl gets startled. He starts to get her attention. After all, it was an important mission. But if he was going on a mission during a birthday, she would go too. After all, she was the representative of the Wu family. Lying, she says she wasn't there for him. But he says that if the girl wanted to accompany him so much, she should have said so earlier. Xiaofan then says that she had a private jet they could use, and from a distance, Xiao Hu observed everything. He felt stirred every time he saw the two together. But there was no more time to waste. They needed to leave soon. As they boarded the plane, Xiaofan says that her father would also be at the party and wanted to meet Chenfeng. He becomes curious upon hearing that. It didn't make sense for her father to want to meet him. But then she says that they were engaged. Their parents had already talked about everything and wanted to take advantage of the party to meet him. They had known each other for a while, so it made sense. Besides, she wanted to make a special request. She wanted to be the mother of his children. He is shocked to hear that request to him. They were just friends. Xiaofan starts to flirt, and he regrets choosing to go on her private jet. Meanwhile, in another part of the plane, Xiaogu wondered if the girl preferred slimmer men, but his servant says that the muscles suited him. Back at the Zhenyi sect, Zhuanling was getting irritated with his team in the mobile game, and when they lost, he accidentally broke his table. A servant arrives and informs him that the guest list for the party was ready. He then asks to leave it on the table and inquires if Chen Feng would come. He was interested in seeing the boy's reaction when he saw the guest. He asks for his phone back and excitedly picks it up to continue playing. Looking at the palace, he remembers that it had been 2,000 years since his master had broken the dragon's candles. Would this generation be able to reverse that karma? Xiaofan comments that some family heads had already arrived. It was strange to have such an early arrival, but it was better to go in and welcome them. Arriving at a higher part of the temple, Chen Feng runs into several tourists. He wasn't used to a sect like this, so he asks Xiaofan if she knows anything. It seemed that people usually went there to pray and ask for wisdom, but that was just an entrance temple. The actual sect was further back. But suddenly a movement catches Chen Feng's attention. An old man was talking to some tourists. He approaches and introduces himself to the monk, saying he had come for the birthday. The man then explains how to get to the sect, but when they come across the bridge he mentioned, Xiaofan is left in awe. It seemed that the bridge was a way for them to separate the cultivators from the real world, because only those who were cultivators could easily cross that bridge. Uncle Chen announces that he would go ahead. Xiaofan was super excited. She had never been to that part of the Jangi sect. But while they were talking, they were interrupted by Sima's son. The girl got annoyed at being interrupted. Who did he think he was? Totally ignoring the guy, Chen Feng asked Yulan to go ahead and grabbed Xiaofan by the waist, telling her to hold on tight. At that moment, Sima's son thought that if they fell, it would be less of a headache. Yulan crossed the bridge effortlessly. Xu Tingfeng applauded the girl and asked who had trained her. Sun told him to take his eyes off her. After all, the girl was only 18. Chen Feng cut in, saying that if they wanted, they could train both of them, since he was the one who taught Yulan everything. But Sima's son couldn't believe that. He seemed too young for that. If he wanted to show off, it was better to prove his worth. In the middle of the bridge, he stopped. He hadn't expected someone from the Blue Star to still be capable of forming formations. Using it on an object was extraordinary. Xu Tingfeng asked why the guy had suddenly stopped, but Sun pretended not to know. But unexpectedly, he finished the path. He had taken the golden ball without much effort and was going to keep it now. He asked for the stone back, saying it was a family heirloom, and angrily grabbed another object. But private fights were prohibited in the Zhenyi sect, Xu Tingfeng said. However, Xun was already motivated to go after Chen Feng. It was strange for someone to be so hostile right off the bat, so he called Hu Hongli and asked him to check on Sun Sima. Xiaofan then commented that she was feeling something was wrong. Everything seemed too calm, but he said it was normal to be calm in a place like that. After all, they were at the Dragon Sect. A message arrived, and he discovered that Wang Zijing had called Sun a few days ago. Back at the entrance of the sect, Xiao Hu had arrived at the point where lynching was. It seemed that the two already knew each other and hadn't seen each other for a while. The old man was happy to see him and commented that the young man should return to cultivate with them. But the redhead had a reason for leaving the mountain. Changing the subject, he wanted his help to intervene with Chen Feng. The old man seemed reluctant, but Xiao Hu had something to bargain with him. Thus, Licheng wanted to know more about what was happening and how he could help. Meanwhile, in the guest area, the three had already been taken to their accommodations, and upon hearing about a training zone, Xiaofan was excited to go. Chen Feng called Yulan to go as well. When they arrived, the girls watched and judged the cultivators fighting in the arena. It seemed like something was still missing in their training. If they continued like this, it would take a long time to evolve. But she appreciated that the men had listened to her and asked who had brought them there. At that moment, Yulan regretted what she had said, but Chen Feng stood by the girl's words. Those two were indeed mediocre, and he said that she was his disciple. As her master, it would be a pleasure to fight with them. The people around began to mock him. It was always like this. Xuanling was also there and warned her brother that this was Mu Chen Feng. Both were interested in knowing the boy's abilities and whether what they said about him was true. After all, it wasn't normal for a young person to have such a high IQ. It seemed they would have the chance to see for themselves what he was capable of. They then arranged how the fight would go. Yulan would go first against the spiky-haired man, and he would fight afterward with the one with the mustache. As soon as she descended, the two greeted each other before the battle, and then the match began. He attempted a direct attack, but Yulan managed to read his movement, dodging it and counterattacking. As he pulled away, he asked his friend for help. It seemed the girl was indeed stronger than expected. The mustached one then made his move, and she dodged, saying he wouldn't accept her like that. She didn't like to fight, but would give her best. They then prepared to attack simultaneously, but she was faster and surprised both of them. Both were thrown far away and surprisingly accepted their defeats. She went to apologize to them, but they said it was all right. They were impressed with her talent despite being so young. Other people were also praising her from the stands when someone appeared looking for Mu Chenfeng. Lynching arrived and asked the young man if he accepted a friendly match, but he had only come for the birthday. He wasn't really in the mood to fight around. Even so, they tried to insist. It wasn't every day that a senior invited someone. He then changed his speech and said he was inviting everyone there, not specifically Chenfeng. but if he wanted to participate, it would make that old man happy. Even so, the young man declined. It seemed that the bait they had created was not working, so they would have to intervene. One of them stands up and says that whether a disciple of the sect or not, whoever wins would have the right to ask him anything. Simic's son jumps straight into the arena and calls Chenfeng for a fight. He asks Senior Linching for permission and gets excited thinking that if he wins, his family will gain more prestige. Chenfeng descends a bit annoyed. It seemed like everyone wanted to fight him in that place. What a drag. But since it was like that, he would take the opportunity to win and find out how to fix the dragon veins. From afar, Linching observed everything. For the first time, he would see the young members of the Mu and Sema families face off. Sun prepares by summoning several knights. He wanted his stone back. Chenfeng observes that formation. It was a good attack, but not enough to deal with him. Even so, the other sends all his soldiers at him. But before he realizes it, the other cultivator is behind him. As soon as he turns around, he receives a slap from Chenfeng and ends up losing the fight. Since he was there, he asks if anyone else wants to compete. That had been very quick. Zhuanling says that Simic's son was weak, but the truth was that Chenfeng was already on another level. He is shocked to hear that from his own brother. Then the other explains that the slap the young man had given clearly contained Kai. How could someone so young do something so advanced? Perhaps even Linching would have difficulties defeating him. But the old man had already gone to the arena to present himself as an opponent. Seeing that he had brought a sword, he also asks Yulan for his. At first glance, Linching recognizes that it is not an ordinary sword and becomes interested. Then Chenfeng would make a point of showing him how to use it. Without wasting time, the old man begins attacking, but the young man dodges. He talks about the technique he had just used, and the other becomes interested. It wasn't so powerful, but quite fast. Linching attacks once more, but he dodges and pushes him away. The movement now released Ki at the end of the attack, making him more powerful and interesting. However, those movements were still not enough to defeat him. The older man had to admit the boy had talent, thus he would attack him with all his power. But there was a small problem. His opponent was Chenfeng. The young man defends himself with his sword, throwing the old man far away, and causing the master's stands to be in shock. The boy's ki was indeed advanced, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to use the sword that way. Truly interesting young people had finally appeared. At the foot of Mount Jangi, a group was gathering. Mu Jiao wanted to infiltrate the party. They were interested in the special shipment that was about to arrive. He had partnered with Jang Ki to obtain the necessary information. In the visitor area, Simic's son had woken up and could not accept his defeat. Desperate, he calls someone, asking for reinforcements. Back in the arena, Yulan celebrated his master's victory. Linching also thanked him and was happy to have fought against such a promising young man. Chenfeng did the same and asked why he had insisted so much on the fight, and the old man says it had been a request from his former student. So it had been Xiao's doing, he confirms. In the stands, the young man was shocked. He hadn't expected his master to lose, but before he noticed, Linching was already behind him, wanting to test his pupil's power as well. Yulan realizes that the senior had dropped something, but Chenfeng says it probably wasn't his, so he would give it to Xiaofan to distract her for a while. Seeing the three leave, one of the female cultivators tries to flirt with him, but Xiaofan doesn't let that pass and says he has a girlfriend. Back in the room, he asks if he really had to meet the girl's father. He hadn't agreed to the engagement yet. She then says that if he wanted, he didn't have to, but they would get married anyway. Chenfeng gives in. He would play her game, but there was one issue bothering her. How would they explain Kui Yulan to others? But he says that didn't matter. There was nothing going on with Yulan that needed explaining. However, Xiaofan wouldn't let it go. She also knew about his fling with Jang Ki, and from now on, he would have to be careful or he would tarnish the Mu name. He cuts off the subject. He didn't want to have that conversation now. Xiaofan pouts. Although at first she had only liked him out of interest, her feelings had gradually grown, until she realized she truly liked him and didn't want to lose him. He then calms her down, saying he would find a way to explain everything. With the mood lighter, Yulan said he just wanted to follow his master, but taking advantage of the lowered guard, someone tries to attack them stealthily. In the last second, Chenfeng had managed to hold on to the knife. Who was the idiot trying to attack them inside the Zhengyi sect? Kui Yulan questions. He then asks her to take care of Xiaofan, as he would check the area. As soon as he steps out, he spots a shadow running in the distance, but as he gets closer, a curtain of smoke surrounds him, and Sima's son appears. He says he didn't know what Wang Zizhong had promised him, but it wouldn't be worth it. However, the boy responds that it was no longer about the other but about his honor. After all, his stabilizing stone was still with him. Two more people appear behind him, and Sima's son says he has raised a barrier. There was nowhere to escape. Chenfeng then kicks the ground, and as he throws the stones towards his opponent, they pass straight through. That was indeed an interesting formation. He thinks a bit about what to do but is interrupted by a series of attacks. The group had about half an hour to try to take him down before the barrier dissipated. They needed to act quickly. Dodging the knives, Chenfeng grabs his phone and asks Yulan to call Uncle Cheng. He was trapped in a barrier and was worried things would get out of control. Seeing that his opponent was in the middle of a phone call, Zun's jaw drops. Well, magical barriers didn't block phone calls. In a few seconds, Cheng appears and knocks out Sima's son, Xiao, who had also come accompanied by some cultivators from the Jangi sect. It was time to send the rude kids home. Seeing the redhead's face, Chenfeng teases him, and the other tells him to go pick coconuts. Uncle Cheng thanks the young man's quick decision. If that fight escalated, it would bring trouble to the sect. It seemed that the masters also wanted to talk to him because of this, which was great, as Chenfeng also wanted to speak with them. He goes to the quarters of the two masters and is warmly received by Xuanling and his brother Wenfeng. After some exchange of compliments, they sit down to talk. In a time of declining spiritual energy, the young man's sky was quite high. They were interested in knowing how, but there was no reason to answer that question. In fact, he was interested in learning about the dragon veins, as they were the oldest there. Perhaps they could explain it to him. However, they could not speak about that. They would answer any other questions. Nevertheless, things were getting out of control. It wasn't the time to keep secrets. After all, how would he restore the dragon veins if he didn't know what had happened? At that moment, Xuanling starts to laugh. Despite the young man's talent, he wouldn't have the capacity for that. After all, why would they depend on him for it? Well, since they weren't going to talk, Chenfeng would find a way on his own. But Wenfeng reconsiders. With his power, he might be capable. His brother knew this, but their success depended on the young man returning alive from Kunlun. An alarm suddenly goes off, and Wenfeng discovers he almost missed the game. Xuanling becomes furious. He couldn't miss the opportunity to secure the new skin. The two start to argue and prepare to play against each other. Outside, Chenfeng was thinking about how he would get to Kunlun when suddenly Yulan comes running. The two return to the room. It seems Xiaofan was having trouble in the game and wanted help. Seeing that it wasn't an emergency, he flicks the girl. He had startled her. She pouts, but soon after, he does the same to Yulan. After all, she had also participated in that. Xiaofan gets annoyed. He couldn't treat the others the way he treated her. But changing the subject, her father had arrived and wanted to meet him. Chenfeng had almost forgotten about that, but they could go there. The two then leave and head back to the base of the mountain together. Inside the bushes, the White Lotus group watches them. One of the men wanted to attack Chenfeng right there, but Muzu cuts their fun short. That said, he asks his team to prepare. They would attack from both inside and outside the Zhenyi sect. It was better that they were ready. Inside the disciples area, Linqing and Xiao Hu were talking about Chenfeng. Even though many were dedicated, no one came close to the young man's abilities. But Xiao Hu was bothered by all those compliments, as he didn't like Chenfeng. His master then says they had to stay alert. Something was about to happen. However, the young man found it a bit impossible. After all, they were in the Dragon Sect. Yet a year ago, they had an incident with the White Lotus, but in the end, everything had been controlled by the Masters. Even so, this sect had a history of causing chaos, to the point that 2,000 years ago, the Master descended from the heavens just to deal with them and seal the magical artifact of the Lotus. Xiao, who had lived for years in those mountains and did not know about that story. It was incredible to learn that his ancestor had been able to seal an entire sect. Well, if he had stayed a few more years, he would have heard about this story and the artifact. In the temple, Wu Jiango was offering his prayers when Chenfeng and Xiaofan arrived. He is asked to enter first, and the girl wishes him good luck. As soon as he reaches her father's side, the man asks him to kneel beside him, but the young man refuses. That deity would not accept his prayers. He begins to speak of Chenfeng's qualities, but finds it strange that he is very young. The monk retorts that sometimes age is not a document. That being said, he had already spoken with his father over the phone, but he wanted to know from his future son-in-law what he could offer to make his daughter happy. However, his daughter was actually someone who did not need others to be happy, the boy replies. Wu Jiangyuo wanted him to yield the power of the Mu when he married. He did not want his daughter to be a widow early, but that was an impossible request. Even so, he insists, but Chenfeng remains impassive. He had enough strength to deal with both, and his future father-in-law need not worry. Moreover, he could try to dismiss him, but the young man would not let him sleep anymore. At that moment, a message arrives speaking of the power that the young man sitting in front of him contained, but he still remains impassive. Seeing that Chenfeng would not obey, he asks him to leave his daughter alone, or he would be forced to suppress the Mu family. Well, if he tried, Chenfeng would show him that not even the entire nation would be able to stop him. Besides, it was Xiaofan who wanted to be with him and not the other way around. He then makes his exit but is stopped. That was not the way to behave. Chenfeng kicks the security guard away. It did not matter what family they were from. He was not someone who could be stopped like that. Wu Jianguo better control his subordinates, he says as he leaves. Xiaofan runs over at him, worried, but he calms the girl by saying that everything is fine. But upon hearing what her father had said, she becomes extremely angry, and Chenfeng stops her before she does something foolish. Inside the master's room, the two brothers were fighting over a game until they heard strange movement from outside. Both stop fighting but decide not to do anything for now. If it was a fight among young people, there was no reason for the older ones to interfere. Zhuanlin agrees with his brother but is curious to see how the fight will end. But Xu Wenfeng says that this would be work for Mu Chenfeng and not for them. Seeing his brother finish all his tea and ruin his teapot, the two start bickering again while Mu Ju observed things from outside. He did not expect the two old men to be fighting at that hour of the night. One of his subordinates asks about the power of the old men, but even with the chief explaining, he still does not understand. Well, they needed to continue the mission. He asks for two to stand guard, and if anything happens, they should notify him. In another part of the forest, the men were also waiting for someone. The blonde was Hu Lai, and he was nervous. They had to observe without being caught. Seeing that the younger one was scared, the other man tries to calm him down by saying that everything would be fine. They just needed to intercept the target quietly. He listens quietly, but then releases all his anger. He starts walking to try to clear his head, but ends up seeing the target right in front of him. Summoning his spiritual master, he sees the perfect moment to attack. From a distance, they observe Chenfeng and the girl. As soon as the fox senses the enemy's power, she asks if Hu Lai was trying to kill her, but it was just about restraining him. Upon hearing this, the final agreement is made. Xiaofan was walking calmly, still complaining about her father when she noticed that Chenfeng had stopped. He had realized that they had been walking in circles for a while. Normally the path would take 20 minutes, but it was almost an hour now. She clings to him and asks if they were trapped in the ghost world, but he was sure that no ghost would dare to haunt them. However, he was not sensing the power of a formation, but rather something more natural. She becomes even more frightened upon hearing that, and he then says that it seemed they only wanted to confuse their path. There was no need to worry. That said, he picks up the phone. The girl thinks he is going to call Uncle Cheng, but in reality, Chenfeng had activated the map's location. Normally, they would call a master for help, but with technology, there were easier ways to deal with that. He tries to free himself from Xiaofan, but she clings even tighter, and as they follow the map, out of nowhere, they notice a person running amidst the conversation. At that very moment, she tells him to capture the person, but that's not how things work. Hu Lai said they could try to figure something out, but the fox spirit knew that the two of them were not capable of handling it. The two then switched bodies again, but unexpectedly, Sima's son was also running through that forest, and the two ended up meeting. He asks who the blonde was, and without thinking twice, he responds, stating his name and that he was from the Lotus Sect. The two then exchange information. It seemed that the sect and Sima's son had the same goal of eliminating Chenfeng. Thus, joining forces with someone was always the best choice, especially against someone strong like their opponent. The two end up lighting a cigarette and start sharing their stories and how much they hated Mu Chenfeng. Moreover, he had strong women by his side. If they could capture one, they could definitely bargain with their enemy. They finally managed to return to the dormitory area, and he asks if Xiaofan could investigate the guest's past, but it would be more efficient if he asked the company and not her. However, he didn't want to depend on them for everything. Yulan asks if everything is okay. They took a while to return, but they only had a small setback, nothing major. Chenfeng then wishes the two good night and goes to his room. During the night, the two girls start talking. Xiaofan wants to know if Yulan likes Chenfeng, but the girl says she is just his student. There was no need to hide it. It was clear from her face that she did. Commenced the older one, but both needed to remember that his position was not easy to follow. If Yulan wanted to accompany him for now, she would allow it, but they would have to talk later. The younger one feels touched hearing that, but suddenly a blade is thrown in their direction, and she protects Xiaofan. She didn't know how many enemies there were, but she would hold them off so the other could call Chenfeng. Thus, the two jump out the window, and Yulan tells her to run. But Sima's son activates a barrier formation to trap the two. Even so, Xiaofan tries to run while the other girl tries to buy time. The two then start to fight, but as soon as he activates his power, the young girl hits him with a piece of wood. This makes him even angrier, but since she couldn't deal with him through magic, she would take advantage of every opening to defeat him with brute force. But she wasn't expecting another opponent to appear and ends up being caught off guard, falling into an illusion. Sima's son felt vindicated, but they needed to get out of there quickly before they were caught. From a distance, Chenfeng observed the chaos, but suddenly Xiaofan appeared, desperate, at his door. She tells him what had happened, and as soon as he hears that Yulan had stayed behind for the others to escape, he runs out. Upon arriving, he notices the natural energy from before and the residue of a barrier. Initially, he didn't want to cause trouble in the sect and would leave it for Jangi to resolve, but now they had gone too far. Suddenly, Master Lynching arrives accompanied by some disciples. He had received a report of 2 men carrying a girl and apologizes for the delay. His disciple had disappeared right under their noses. It was better that they figured something out quickly. The master receives a call, and it seems that the disciples who had found the suspicious men were missiled, so he apologizes again. But apologies wouldn't resolve what had happened. It was better for the sect to be prepared, and after resolving it, he would demand a formal apology. The masters arrive, knowing what had happened, and were ready to resolve it. But irritated by Chen Feng's tone, Xuanlin tries to pick a fight with him. However, this was a terrible moment for that, as the young man was already out of patience. Even so, the old man wanted to take the opportunity to test his power and see how much of it was just empty words. Chen Feng doesn't even make an effort to block the master's attack, and quickly extinguishes it. For the power he had at that moment, the Jangi sect was not capable of stopping him. He returns to speaking with Lynching about searching for Yulan, but someone calls him. Hu Hongli was the president of the company. He had managed to locate the girl, and it was better to go there soon. Mu Zhou couldn't be more irritated. The entire sect was on alert because Hu Lai decided to act alone. One action had completely ruined his plans. He called one of his partners and took the opportunity to use the information he had at his disposal. Turning to Xuan Feng, he said he had discovered the identities of the 2 kidnappers. It was better that they were able to find the girl before dawn. Xuan Feng observed the type of cultivation of the young man and asked if he was practicing the 3 paths. But his cultivation method was not the issue that mattered right now. Zhao Hu and Xiao Fan arrived at the location. The girl was clearly worried about Yulan. However, the situation was very dangerous. It was better for her to stay out of it. The girl passed out, and he handed her over to Xiaohu. He needed him to take care of her for now. Even knowing she would be upset when she woke up, it was better than her losing her life. Chen Feng then began to command the disciples of Jangi. He and Uncle Cheng were sitting at the foot of the mountain. It was almost dawn. Being in another sect and having received her location, he let them handle it to avoid further problems. Cheng knew that if he decided to break the rules, there was no way to stop him. He would be by his side. But the young man understood that, in the end, what happened was not Zhengi's fault. The older man offered him a cigarette to relax, but Chen Feng wasn't interested. While they were talking, Zhu Tingfeng approached and asked if he could join them. He explained that he had the knowledge to break the barriers of the Sima family and wanted to help. But Chen Feng declined the help. He didn't want another family involved. Zhu Tingfeng insisted a little more. He actually wanted recommendations to join the company, as he wasn't very good at socializing, so maybe this would help him. After hearing his true intentions, he then said he could sit with them. From a distance, a young woman approached, and Chen Feng asked which family she was from. She crossed the bridge easily and was happy to meet Master Mu for the first time. The girl introduced herself as Sima Sanying and said she had come to help capture her son. He quickly cut her off. The company and the Jangi were already acting, and if she interfered, it could jeopardize the mission. She understood immediately and withdrew. Another person arrived. He seemed to be a master from the Hu family. That guy was Hu Jeng, one of the families working for the company, and he didn't seem very happy to be there. However, the notification had been made formally. There was no reason to complain. The man wasn't one to take insults lightly, but neither was Chen Feng. Seeing that things were heating up, Sima Sanning tried to calm both of them. Well, since everyone had arrived, it was time for them to spring into action as well. Simak's son had gone out to buy some things, and upon returning, he asked how the girl was. Hu Lai said he had sealed her powers, and now she was quite weak. He would take a little walk, so he could take his time with her. Simak's son felt awkward hearing that, but the blonde urged him. He had already informed the Lotus Sect of their location, so it was better to hurry before reinforcements arrived. He entered the room, and Yulan was impassive, but now he was no longer afraid of her. Sun threw the socks on the bed and asked her to put them on. He would give her some time to do it alone. The girl asked for it to be over quickly, but she did as he instructed. Wearing a very strange outfit, he entered the room, surprising Kui Yulan. Acting like a big bad wolf, surprisingly he knelt in front of her and asked her to punish him. A sound could be heard, and in front of that unusual scene, everyone looked on in shock. He didn't know that was the type of roleplay he enjoyed. At that moment, everyone grabbed their phones to capture the moment, but the young woman couldn't have been happier to see her master. Upon seeing her mother, Simak's son's soul left his body. She wasted no time and began to beat her son. On the other side of the room, Chen Feng remarked that Yulan looked beautiful in that style, and the young woman was happy to hear that, but she soon became aware of her body and felt a bit embarrassed. However, he said it was all right. She was charming after all, and there was no need to be ashamed. Holding her son by the ear, Sima Sanning asked if she could take that troublemaker home, but it wasn't up to him to release her son or not. The woman began to plead with him, and Chen Feng mimicked her out of teasing. Calmly, Yulan explains that he really couldn't make that decision. It would depend on the company. She starts scolding her son again, and the boy apologizes to both of them. But even so, his mother wasn't going to let him off that easily. He then begins to recount everything that had happened from the beginning, about Wang Zizong's promises and about Yulan. Based on the information he had provided, the company would determine what his punishment would be. Chenfeng asks where Yulan had gone, but Sima's son didn't know either. From the top of the company building, a helicopter was preparing for takeoff. It seemed that Lai Sizi would participate in a mission on their behalf for the first time. Even though it was risky, they had implanted a tracker on her. They would keep an eye on her. However, Hu Hongli still had his reservations. President Liu calms him, saying she had already accepted the terms. They had to give her a vote of confidence. Besides, Chenfeng would be there. Sizi wouldn't be foolish enough to cause trouble. She had just gained her freedom. She wouldn't throw it all away. They needed to leave soon, or they would be late. The president gives a few commands to Hongli, and the two depart. Hulai was returning from his walk when he noticed the sect's servants in front of the hotel where they were staying. Hu Jeng appears behind him and says that the young man was surrounded. It seems that the two knew each other, but the young man had chosen to follow a different path and decided to confront his relative. It was sad for the elder to see a genius wasting his youth like that. Inside a building, Zhuge Tingfeng raises a barrier around the two, allowing them to fight without external interference. The elder activates the fox spirit and says they needed to subdue the young man in front of them. The two begin to fight, and the boy charges at him. Both were familiar with each other's movements, as they fought using similar techniques, which kept things somewhat balanced. From a distance, Chenfeng watched the battle, interested in that power. Due to the drop in ki over the years, using the nature spirit had been a good idea. Hulai tries to escape, realizing he wouldn't be able to handle the elder, but Chenfeng was already expecting that and hits him with a coin. No one had said he could escape. Everyone in the Dragon City would have to answer to the company. Or if the boy preferred, he could deal with him right there in front of everyone, and no one would be able to stop him. Hulai begins to apologize. Chenfeng had already let him go once and wanted to take the opportunity to teach the kid a small lesson. Hu Jeng asks for permission to continue from there, but young Master Mu wasn't very interested. He says that the boy was a member of his family, so it was up to him to punish him. But that talk wouldn't help. If he wanted to take Hulai back, he would have to face Chenfeng first. Hearing that, Hu Jeng says he would tell President Liu everything, but the other hits him. It seems he still hadn't understood Chenfeng's relationship with the company. It wasn't him who needed them, but the other way around. But soon the helicopter lands, and President Liu arrives with Sizi. He says that the company's final decision was to hand Hulai over to the Hu family. Sizi takes the opportunity to charm him, but it wasn't the time for that. The president begins to explain about Sizi's release in his decision regarding what happened in Jangi. The cleanup team had already been called, and from now on, it would be the company's responsibility, not Chenfeng's. The woman asks him not to forget the agreement they made, but she didn't need to worry. He would keep his word as long as she stayed by Chenfeng's side. It seemed that now the two would be colleagues, she celebrated. But returning to the current situation as requested, he returns Hulai and says he didn't want to see the two of them in front of him anytime soon. Meanwhile, he wanted to know more about the magical artifacts Sazai had mentioned earlier. She explains about a jade that could release lightning and that it was capable of opening the gates of Yulan. Upon hearing that, he stopped abruptly, and she said that although it seemed easy to handle objects of that level, it was quite complicated. But he was aware of that. After all, he also had a magical artifact in his pocket. Seeing the sword, Sizi begins to praise him, saying perhaps a new era had finally arrived, and if she were by his side, she might be able to maintain her sect in the future. But he pulls away from her. He didn't like forward women, and besides, if she tried any funny business, he would show her what he was capable of. Sizi responds by saying he didn't need to worry about that. She would be a good girl. Back at the hotel from before, son Sima was still apologizing to Kui Yulan. Upon seeing him return, Son's mother asks what the decision had been, and he says that the president had left the final decision in his hands. Moreover, he wanted to introduce his new partner, Lei Sizi, the former leader of the White Lotus. Hearing her name, the boy is taken aback, but there was no reason for him to be shocked. The contract had already been signed, and now she was part of them. However, until then, the White Lotus had been causing confusion in Jangi as things had changed, but with no patience for the nonsense, his mother silenced him again. If she was now with the company, then that was it. There was no need to question anything. Seeing the boy downcast, Sizi approaches him and says that if he behaved, he would be released quickly. He feels happy to hear that. He would do anything to cooperate. She then asks if Muju was behind this, and the boy starts talking about their interest in the shipment that was about to arrive. Well, now that they had discovered this, they knew that Muju must also be after the artifact. The company had indeed made the right call in having Sizi work with them, and she was willing to do everything, as long as it was within the company's rules. Simak's son gets excited and asks to be Sizi's servant, but she wasn't very keen on that. Still worried about her son's punishment, The mother asks what Chen Feng's decision was. The young man then concludes that he didn't want to cause trouble for anyone, so Sima's son would have to cooperate with the company for 3 years without being able to leave home. Since they had arrived in time, things could still be resolved amicably. Sima Sanying thanks the young man for his benevolence, and regarding Zhu Tingfeng, she would speak to the president about him as soon as she could, and he thanks her as well. Meanwhile, on the road, Mu Jiu was preparing the ambush. Little did he know that he was about to be thwarted by Chen Feng, who was taking the opportunity to talk to Kui Yulan. What she had done, although heroic, had been very risky. She needed to be more careful next time. Sizzy joins the conversation, trying to defend the girl, and he says he wasn't calling her incapable, he was just worried. The driver receives a phone call. It seems the White Lotus had started to move. Therefore, they needed to hurry. She checks the sect's messages and says that Muju should be involved in this ambush. Thus, Chen Feng would head straight into the mountains while they assisted the trucks and asks Yulan to send the location to the company. In the meantime, he makes a call requesting support for the capture. The masters observed the road, already aware of the attempted cargo theft. But they wouldn't have a headache. After all, the company had taken the lead. However, that was their anniversary cargo. If it were stolen, Zhuanling wouldn't let it slide. Because of this, he was starting to feel anxious. Zhuanfeng laughs and tells him to calm down. He couldn't let his emotions take over like that. It was better for them to let the younger ones handle it and just watch. But then, Zhuanling bets 2 skins from their game. This catches his brother off guard. To convince him even more, he raises the bet to 3 skins. Well, the older ones always have to help the younger ones, but he couldn't go back on his word. He would have to give him the 3 skins. Zhuanling says he will keep his word, and then the 2 leave. But Muju was watching everything, and it was exactly what he wanted. With the guard down inside the sect, he would be able to obtain the jade pendant without many obstacles. He always knew he was the ideal leader, not Lei Sisi. On the road, the truck driver was giving his position over the phone when a person appeared in front of him. The ground is shattered, and the truck flies into the air. The White Lotus had finally made its move. The driver continued on the phone but was thrown far away by one of the sect's henchmen. This guy informs his boss that he had managed to intercept the cargo. Now they just needed to flip the truck and leave. But suddenly, another car arrived at the scene and Sizzy appeared at the window, asking what they thought they were doing. But the man says she had betrayed the Lotus. However, that wasn't true. It was Muju who was trying to pull a fast one. While she was talking to the men, Yulan was sending them their location. Suddenly, a motorcycle approached the scene with the 2 Jangi masters on it. Seeing the net closing in, the tattooed man gives the order to retreat. But it was already too late. The company's containment and cleanup team had already arrived at the scene. They wouldn't let any of them escape. In the treasure area, 2 young men were conversing when Muju attacked them by surprise. He managed to take them down in a few seconds. This time, the boy was convinced that no one would be able to stop him. Muju began to look at treasure after treasure to see which one might serve him as well, until he spotted a box on the shelf and finally found the jade pendant. But Chenfeng had arrived, and as soon as the boy noticed, he got into a defensive stance. Well, he had 2 options, to surrender peacefully or by force. He could choose. Mu Jiao had to congratulate him. He thought his plan would be perfect, but he had discovered everything. Well, the company had its ways of obtaining information. Even so, they would not be able to stop him now that he had the jade pendant. He tried to activate the artifact's power, but Chenfeng held him back. Despite being magical, the person using it did not have enough strength. Mu Jiao stepped back and realizing that his opponent could condense his QI, was in shock. In response, he activated his sword. The young man had taken too long to realize his power. Seeing that his plan was going down the drain, he began to laugh and attempted a somewhat risky move, using his blood to activate the jade. Well, he could try whatever he wanted. He would find a way to stop him. The 2 then prepared for the clash, and as soon as they collided for the first time, the white-haired one was thrown away. Despite everything, he did not give up. However, knowing he would not be able to leave alive, Muju fled, abandoning the jade artifact he was holding. He jumped out the window, but since he had used the object, there was still a remnant of his spiritual energy. Even if he tried to escape, Chenfeng would find a way to locate him. Back on the road, Kui Yulan asked if they should help, but Sizzy said that in that case, they could let the others handle it for them. After all, that was the company's job. Moreover, the 2 masters had not lifted a finger either. Still, she felt guilty for not helping. But Lai Sizzy told her she was being silly. She was different from them. However, this kind of situation still made the young girl feel awkward. And as they talked, Sizzy began to take a liking to the girl. She wanted to teach her a few things later. Zhuanfeng was impressed to see the former leader of the Lotus helping the company. But his brother didn't care. At least his gift had been saved. It seemed that Sizzy had called one of them some time ago, but Zhuanfeng wasn't sure if it was her voice. Well, whatever, that didn't matter anymore. Near the truck, the henchmen of the White Lotus were managing to react. It was complicated to try to escape, but maybe the 2 of them could. Seeing them climb the mountain, the warning was passed along. Yulan asked why Suzy had betrayed her followers, but in reality, they were not her team. They were Mu Zhao's. When her parents passed away, the boy who recruited her, at first she didn't understand her parents' situation and didn't want to leave. But he was the one who made her face reality and join the sect, promising to avenge her parents. Mu Zhao was good at manipulating people. While they waited, she was going to check the forest. Maybe Chen Feng needed help, but as soon as she entered, she ended up running into Mu Zhao. He looked quite worn out. At the entrance of the sect, a woman was climbing the stairs. It seemed she had been the informant for the White Lotus, and yet everything had gone wrong. She then thought of another plan, but coming down the stairs was Chen Feng. Seeing someone coming, she took the opportunity to ask if everything was okay with the sect, as she had noticed some strange activity. Chen Feng asked who she was, and the girl introduced herself as Lu Zhen and said she had come for the birthday. He also introduced himself and asked the girl to accompany him. It was dangerous to stay there. The girl followed him, asking him a few questions about the company, but he was short on time. Until she mentioned that she had spotted 2 people in the forest a little while ago, she had gotten scared and left. Chen Feng then asked her to take him there. While they talked, it seemed that Mu Zhao was responsible for the death of Suzy's parents, but he said that the methods do not justify the means. She is strong today because of him. However, Lai Suzy could have had a normal life if it weren't for him, so her anger towards him was monstrous. He dodged the first attack, but he was very weak. Taking advantage of the moment, the woman struck his leg. She also had a secret. The ambush that the previous leader fell into had been her fault. Mu Zhao asked how she had the courage to betray the sect like that, and the truth was that Lai Suzy felt disgusted by that man, so he got what he deserved. She screamed, hitting him with another barrage of needles. She had only learned to fight because of Mu Zhao. She would make a point of using that knowledge against him. The boy said he only had one regret, which was saving her that day. Well, those were his last words before Suzy erased him for good. One of the company's men arrived at the scene. The execution was prohibited, but she wasn't an official member of the company yet. Still, she would accept the consequences. A few seconds later, Chen Feng arrived, also complaining. She tried to defend herself, but he interrupted, asking the man to report to the president that Mu Zhao had died trying to resist arrest. The guy looked a bit apprehensive but complied with the order. Lai Suzy thanked him for his help, but she didn't want that kind of thing to happen again. Let it be the first and last time. So be it. She was really interested in the new girl who had appeared. Chen Feng was quite the stallion, but he said it had nothing to do with him. The girl had only helped him get to them. Changing the subject, he wanted to know if Mu Zhao had said anything else. It seemed he was cooperating with someone, but she didn't know who. A meeting gathering all the participants of the company was taking place. They were debating the case of the Jangi sect and the White Lotus. Even though the extermination of the Lotus was the agenda, that was not the company's intention. Moreover, it seemed that someone was behind everything. The Lotus had been used as a pawn. This left everyone in an uproar. The president then began to show the evidence. That symbol on the watch belonged to the squad. Thus, even though their case had been closed years ago, they would have to reopen it. But it didn't seem like it would be a simple case, as the mission had been classified as ultra-secret. They needed to think calmly. After all, the entire squad had been exterminated in the past. Perhaps it was someone new trying to use their shadows. Even with the meeting not concluded, President Liu decided to leave. He had matters to resolve with the remnants of the White Lotus. As he walked, he made a call and requested an investigation into Hu Ji. Upon hearing that name, Chen Feng became confused, and Suzy also recognized that name. It seemed this guy had disappeared some time ago. He then asked if she knew anything more, but she had only heard that the guy was a genius from the Hu family who had vanished. Maybe it would be good for him to contact Hu-san. He would probably know something. Chen Feng called Yulan and asked her to return with the company. From there, he would investigate with Suzy. After all, she at least knew something. Suddenly, Liu Zhen said she knew where the host lived. She had been there before. This information would be very good for them. The girl fiddled with her earring. It seemed a nature spirit accompanied her, and she also knew Hu Ji. Everyone was interested in his whereabouts. At the airport, the three had returned to the city, and a group of guards had come to pick them up personally. Around them, people were commenting on who they might be, and before attracting more attention, they all got into the car. Upon arriving at the mansion, Jeng was already waiting for them, which surprised Chen Feng. Well, since they were coming for an inspection, the head of the family had to be present. He entered, and everyone went straight to the entrance temple. No one there wanted to cause confusion, so everyone could feel at ease. Chen Feng began to talk about some safety precautions, especially to prevent a fire from happening accidentally. It seemed the young man was quite particular about these details. Jeng said he would correct things according to the rules, but not everyone was comfortable with the young man's provocations, and he asked the chief to keep his subordinates under control. Sissy commented that the temperaments of the two were not very good. Liu better be careful. He mentioned a few more details, and the hot-headed disciple ended up losing his patience, but he was nothing compared to Chen Feng. Well, if they wanted to fight so much, They could just call him for a duel. Zhen stood on guard. No one had ever managed to cancel the fox spirit that way. If he wanted to learn, Feng would teach him. He then dismissed his disciples. He wanted to have a little chat with the young man. Master Mu also asked the girls to wait for him, and the two went out to talk privately. At first he had no reason to go to their house, but he had received orders from above. But the one he was looking for had disappeared, so he needed leads. Zhen began to tell that 15 years ago, Shoji had received a phone call. The young man had left in the middle of the night, saying he couldn't explain why. He even asked his son to start before leaving, but the young man refused and went away, returning 5 years later. He had delivered a box and asked that it only be given to whoever came looking for him. Those dates matched the founding of the company. Could things be interconnected? He blew on the box, and as soon as he opened it, he came face to face with the squad's symbol. Well, the information he had was that Huji had joined this group to defend the country from the dragon, and it seemed that the diary contained the details. It described his battles and the restoration of the dragon's vein in Kunlun. Zhen couldn't be happier to hear that his son had been a hero, but it seemed there was a missing part, and this could be related to the disappearance. However, the old man hadn't opened the box since he received it. Feng believed in him and thanked him for the help, but Zhen asked him to wait as San wanted to meet him. In Yanbei, Xiaofan complained about not being able to leave the house. She had even had her phone confiscated. She couldn't believe it. Uncle Chang tried to calm the situation. Her father had his reasons, but the girl didn't want to hear it. She was upset nonetheless. She asked about the Wang family, and it seemed they had already been controlled. Well, at least she had some good news. Chang also passed on the whereabouts of Mu Feng to her, and if he was in an investigation, she would find a way to help him from the outside. But it seemed the Mu family had also participated in the squad, so they had to be cautious. But she couldn't care less whether her father would like that or not. For Feng, she wouldn't mind getting her hands dirty again. Back at the Hu mansion, they talked as they headed to the master's quarters. From there he had to go alone, but upon arriving, he discovered that San was quite different from what he expected. Well, with the reduction of spiritual energy, it was difficult to maintain his true form, and he had to congratulate him for achieving ki condensation at such a young age. But he had no time to waste. He wanted to know why he had been called there. The fox began to share more about Huji. She wanted to help with the investigation after all. He was her golden disciple. When he returned to the temple, he had told her he was going to Kunlun, but he never came back, and the truth was that she feared the same would happen to Feng. However, spiritual power was linked to the soul. If the fox wanted to keep an eye on him so much, they would have a problem. She activated her power, wanting to know if he would really be capable of going to Kunlun. If not, he would just be another promising soul wasted. But she was doing this without proper permission. She would have problems because of it. Seeing that she wouldn't back down, he activated his magical artifact. Since this was a test, he would give it his all and expected the same from her. The two faced off, and she noticed that the artifact he was using was much older than the soul that should be in that body. Something was out of place. Taking advantage of her lowered guard, he grabbed San by the neck. He had understood how her attacks worked, but he couldn't kill her. If he did, he would pick a fight with the Hu clan and have trouble getting more information. So they would make a deal, and it was better that she didn't lie to him. He had dealt with several spirits like her before. Centuries ago, the Sakura Kingdom had invaded the Dragon Kingdom. This coincided with the extermination of the squad. But what did it have to do with Kunlun? Well, the most dangerous thing there isn't the people but the miasma that affects people's spirit. But if that was the case, what kind of method was used to break the dragon's vein? The truth is that even the fox doesn't know what the celestial master used back then. That information had already helped him. It was better that she and her descendants helped him from then on. Meanwhile, at the Jeng family corporation, Jang Ki was coordinating things very well along with the Mu and Wu families. Suddenly, a young man appeared saying he wanted to speak with her, and the guards went on high alert. But he sent the man flying and said he wanted to talk to her alone. Well, since it was like that, at least she wanted to choose the location. The two then got into her car and went to a restaurant. He asked if she wasn't afraid, but the young CEO knew very well how to defend herself. Thus, he says he was sent by Madame Wu and wanted her to take him to Yanbei. But she wanted more information. She couldn't travel just like that without knowing the reason. Well, he was only there for the money, and it seemed to have something to do with Mu Feng. Jang Ki says he would go, but he would need 2 days to organize the company's affairs. They set the meeting place and leave. As soon as he returned from the conversation, he gathered with the girls and they went to the guest area. He was a bit worried about staying there. After all, he had caused problems earlier. But a girl arrives and asks for their suitcase. She accidentally knocks one over and apologizes, but puts something inside his suitcase. Feng notices the strange movement, and as soon as he questions her, the girl runs away. Lai Sizi offers to chase after her. They needed to find out who she was. It seemed she had put a phone inside the suitcase, curious. As Liu Jing approaches, he lets slip that it was his brother Huji's phone. That was news. The girl hadn't mentioned that they knew each other. It would be better if she told him everything soon, or he would call the company to investigate her. She begins to explain that the Liu and Hu families had always gotten along, and they used to play together. Well, since that phone should contain important information about the squad, she asks about this organization, but what they were 10 years ago doesn't compare to what they are today. There was a list of numbers there that he would take advantage of and send to the company. But there was a name recorded in the last call called Pekonina. She must be just some girl. From a distance, while watching, the woman tells Master Cheng that the phone had been delivered successfully. Well, since the duty was fulfilled, she could leave. Suzy returns alone. That woman had really managed to escape from her. If she hadn't been able to follow her, there was nothing to be done. But suddenly the windows shattered, and 2 daggers flew in, and 2 men burst through the door after the phone and the girl. Chenfeng asks Suzy to take care of the girl, and goes after the 2. He manages to intercept one of them. It's better to spill the beans quickly. The guy says that if he continued investigating, the Mu family would be next. But upon realizing they were assassins and had a second team, he returns to the room. Apparently he wasn't the target. The 2 were talking, and Suzy was trying to calm her down when 2 men appeared at the window. She manages to stop one of them, but the other catches her off guard. 2 more people enter the room. Liu Zhang was their target. The guy throws Suzy against the wall, and they jump from the building, but the girl was much calmer than they expected. Inside a factory, they start asking her questions about Huji, and it would be better if she spoke up quickly. Otherwise, he would keep going. At a camp, a young woman arrives with a girl by her side and introduces her to Huji. He didn't expect the Liu family to send someone so young, but it was better not to underestimate the girl because her IQ was quite high. He then welcomes her, but first they had to do a small test, and thus he sees that the girl really had talent. They just needed to train her properly. Liu Zhang would make a great master. Thus he asks the girl to open her heart and accept the spirit of the fox. And now it was time for her to show what she was capable of. It was better for that man to start talking about what he knew and who had sent him. He didn't expect the girl to be protected by the spirit. Other men tried to restrain her but ended up getting hit. Little by little, she was taking the opportunity to absorb their energy. Seeing what she was capable of, the guy starts to back away in fear. She asks again what he wanted, but the guy tries to bite the poison in his tooth. Liu Zhang stops him, and just like he did with the others, restricts his soul. But soon after, his power wanes. Even after training for years, he couldn't hold a candle to Huji. Soon after, Suzy and Chenfeng arrive at the location. The woman goes straight to see who the masked men were, while the girl says that Chenfeng could ask her anything he wanted. He then asks who she was, and the girl says she was Pequanina, and that she was going to Kunlun to complete the final mission of the first squad. Lei Suzy returns and says that everyone inside had been taken away. To avoid drawing attention, Chenfeng tells the president that he had knocked the guys out. Liu Zhang then asks why he was helping him, and he says he wanted to avoid confusion for now. It was better to keep it a secret. The girl thanks him and asks if there was anything else he wanted to know, and he says no. At the moment he had to think about what to do regarding the Blue Star. Their technology was advancing quite a bit, which worried him. The day begins to fall, and they decide to return to the hotel. Seeing Chenfeng being so careful was getting Suzy chills. Back at the hotel, he starts asking about the girl's powers. She was more evolved than he expected. He was curious. She then explains that the power she contained was actually her grandfather's, and that it was the only thing that had returned from Kunlun. The spiritual rules were much more complex. While he wasn't interested in her past, he wanted to know more about Kunlun. But she says that when they went there, they hadn't found anything about the dragon veins, even though this information had been passed down for generations. At that time, they had received a mission to retrieve an object in Kulan, but they failed, and the only thing they knew was that it had been left by Zhang Daolin. He was responsible for the breaking of the veins and who held the secret of immortality. It was a surprise for Suzy to hear that name. The little she knew about the history of that immortal showed how much he was actually against immortality. The squad had been naive. Liu Zhang gets irritated seeing the squad being insulted that way, but it was better for her to tone it down. It was better not to create confusion with Suzy. Seeing that things were heating up, Chenfeng interrupts the two, and the older one goes back to the bathroom to dry her hair, while the other was impressed with the power she felt. He asks if she knew anything more, but before her team reached the object, they were ambushed by the ninjas from the land of the Sakuras. But something was wrong. It wasn't supposed to be possible for the Sakuras to enter Kunlun like that. She'd have thought the same. There were probably traitors among them. And also, according to the news, everyone had died. How did she survive? From a distance, a team of ninjas was watching them, and they had received the green light to attack. It seems they were from the Imperial Army and couldn't let the girl fall into the hands of the company. At least they would find a way to get her back. Several shuriken invade the room. Feng thinks quickly and turns the table to defend himself. He takes the opportunity to turn off the light and tells Sizzy and Liu to go out first. Something didn't make sense. An invasion from them was not normal. Sizzy pulls the girl to the door, but as soon as she opens it, she comes face to face with a ninja. She acts quickly and takes him out, clearing the way for the two. From a distance, the guy with white hair realizes that they have escaped and decides to join the game. Feng was surrounded when the other arrived in the room and says he would give him a chance to surrender to the Koga and work for the Sakura Nation. They had a lot of interest in talents like him, but he wouldn't give up that easily. Using his artifact, the young man electrocutes all the ninjas that were there. He had to admit they had the courage to try to fight against him. Kimura stands up saying they wouldn't be defeated that easily, but Feng wasn't joking. Anyone who stood in his way would be ruined. At the airport, someone tries to hail a taxi, but a young man cuts in front of him and gets in. Yuji Shibahara had just arrived in the country and was one of the 12 ninjas from Sakura. Kota Yokawa, one of his partners, arrived shortly after. They couldn't draw attention, but there were cameras installed everywhere, so it was better for them to treat the mission like a trip. But the older one was very strict with the rules, which irritated the younger one. If everything was to be done so rigidly, he and Anna wouldn't have been chosen. Hearing that name, he remembers how he lost the leadership position to her. A car approaches when they receive a call. It seems the target had managed to escape. Without thinking twice, they get into the car and head to the location. Arriving at the hotel, Yuji Shibahara illustrates his sword when Kota Yokawa returns to the room to give the news about Kimura's death. It seemed that some talents still existed in China, which excited him. Kota Yokawa asks to go with him, but the older one replies that a true ninja works alone. The younger one complains about the old man's arrogance, but also decides not to stay still. Feng runs down the street while being chased by ninjas, but upon sensing a different presence, he stops. Yuji Shibahara had arrived at the location and was interested in the young man's power. The young man says it would be a pleasure to fight him as long as it was one-on-one, and the elder responds by saying that he had already dismissed the others. Well, in that case, he would not deny a fair fight. It seemed they still did not know his true IQ level, which was an advantage. Yuji prepares for the fight and introduces himself, talking a bit about his style of fencing. It would be a pleasure to fight with a samurai master like him. Their first clash occurs and both step back. Both weapons were quite powerful, and Yuji's was capable of cutting iron. However, Feng says that it was nothing. He could do the same. His opponent is startled after all. His sword was made of wood. It would be difficult to explain that now, so it was better to just fight. With a few strikes, the protagonist manages to cut through the other's attack and hits him. The elder did not expect to be defeated in that way, and taking advantage of the moment, Feng begins to ask some questions. But Yuji would never be able to betray the Koga. Well, since it was like that, he would find a way to make him talk. But in the middle of it, he receives a call about the ninjas and takes the opportunity to say that he had defeated one of them. He wanted to know how they had been able to enter the country without anyone noticing beforehand. Upon hanging up, he returns his attention to his opponent and apologizes for the delay. It was time to go to a more private place to have a little chat. Jang Ki finally arrived at the Wu mansion, and with her work done, the young man leaves. Chang came to pick her up, and they greet each other. It had been a while since they last saw each other. As they walk, he explains about Mu Feng's current mission and how, unfortunately, Fan and he could not help the young man at the moment. He asks her to sit down and explains that she had been chosen precisely because she was the most capable person her master knew at that time. Jang Ki questions whether this would not make her jealous, but Uncle Chang tells her not to worry about that for now. He hands her a tablet with the necessary numbers and confidential information, but as soon as she sees the content, she regrets agreeing to come there. However, everything they had done was for the sake of saving the Wu family at the time, and with this knowledge, she could decide how to help Mu Feng. He was dragging the samurai when a car appeared. He thought they were reinforcements from the ninjas, but in fact she was not an enemy. The girl says she was sent by Madame Jeng and that she had arranged a house for him, but Feng was still suspicious. Then she says something that only Jang Ki and he would know, which makes him a bit flustered. Once at the location, it was time for him and the elder to have a good conversation, but he would not give in easily. He knew they would soon notice his absence. Well, he wanted to see how good the Sakuras were. Yuji says that cheap tricks would not work on him, but he is silenced as Feng touches his forehead. Trying not to yield, he starts to scream, and the young man wanted to know how resilient he would be. Outside the house, President Liu had just arrived. Feng opens the door for him and tells him to come in alone. He was unable to trust the company after discovering that the ninjas had entered the country without problems, but he appreciated that the traitor was not in Yuzhou. Even so, he wanted proof to be able to trust again. The president then tells him that the company had a base in Yanbai and another in Yuzhou. But that was not enough. He still did not know how he had managed to find him. Only he and the Wu family knew about that house. In this, the company was left out. And returning to the topic during the meeting, He suspected that the possible traitor was in Yanbei. According to what he knew, the people of Kunlun did not have powers, but since they cultivated, it seemed they were capable of achieving immortality. And until Chenfeng joined him, the president was skeptical about this. He also knew about the intention to restore the dragon veins. Well, it was interesting to hear that. As long as his motives did not interfere with those of the company, Liu would turn a blind eye. That said, he would take care of the samurai while he went to Kunlun. The two then finalized the agreement, but if Liu was lying, he would end Yuzhou and make sure to finish Yanbei. Liu Jeng had finally managed to shake off some ninjas. They were really good at hunting people, even making the two separate. But suddenly a guy comes toward her and offers help. But she could identify that smell from miles away. He releases his mana to protect himself, and she charges at him. The two start to fight. When he tries to poison her, the girl pulls away. Yukama Kauta introduces herself and says she was part of the 12 ninjas. Even though she had diverted the steam from her poison, it had taken effect, and gradually her body's ki was being sealed. She remembers in the past, CF conducting various experiments with poison that prepared her to deal with future problems. The woman would place the girl in the bathtub and ask her to train the circulation of her power so that the poison wouldn't enter her body. And if she did, she would also be able to expel it. After all, her poisons were the best in the world, so it was better for her to prepare properly, as it wouldn't be so easy. Seeing that she was down, he already starts to sing victory. After all, he was confident in his poisons. But unfortunately for him, she was just taking the opportunity to cleanse her ki, and as soon as he got close, she attacked him. He says that a needle wouldn't be enough to finish him off, but soon he starts to feel nauseous. Liu Jeng had poisoned him back. Seeing that he was going down, he begins to plead for his life and says he would tell her everything if she saved him. But she had already obtained the information she wanted, which was that he belonged to the Setu family. Driving through the city, Chenfeng thought about everything he had discovered and how those things must be related. He had managed to talk to Sizzy as soon as he left the house, but he was worried about Liu even knowing the girl was strong. Chenfeng parks and tells the woman to get in. He wanted to know where Liu went when they separated. Sizzy was irritated with herself for leaving the girl alone, and the young man found that somewhat cute of her. She asked how he was so calm, and he said he knew they would find her safe, so she could relax. Well, now he was aware that the girl was the target of the ninjas. When they turned the corner, they found a man lying down. He was one of the ninjas and had clearly been poisoned, but there were no enemies around. It seemed he had come alone. Yulan appears and says that the ninjas around had been contained by the company, and that this was Yukama Kauta. Sizzy is shocked to see that she had evolved more in just a few days. But Chenfeng wanted to know what she was doing there instead of being at school. It seems the company had taken care of that and asked her to accompany them. Moreover, there was information that the 12 Kuga ninjas had infiltrated the country. Well, at least now there were 2 less. Thus, they would head to Kunlun. The girls could go by car, and he would take the train to see if they could stop him along the way. Sizzy asks about Liu Zhen, but he says she was probably heading to the same destination as them. They would surely meet. Uncle Cheng arrives with new information for Jang Ki, and that everyone was on their way to Kunlun. But she was very engrossed in the stories of the past. He questions her about being so calm, and the woman says she knew how strong Mu Chenfeng was. There was no need to worry. Furthermore, the traitor behind everything was more important than their trip at the moment. It seems the Wu had a partnership with the Exu, but to this day they didn't know the name of the traitor. Well, from the information they were looking for in Kunlun, it should be with that person. To learn more, she would need information from the seniors who left the country. It was difficult because it was a company secret, but Jang Ki knew that this wouldn't be a problem for the Wu to obtain. Already on the bullet train, Chenfeng was observing the scenery when a girl approached him. She was Yuya Yamanaka, one of the 12 ninjas. He ignores her and says he doesn't want to talk. A man sitting across from her helps her lift her suitcase and complains to him. The guy sits back down and the girl starts flirting with Chenfeng. Well, instead of insisting on him, why not sit with the guy who helped her? But the more he ignored her, the more interested she became in the people from the Dragon Country. He notes this distinctive comment. It meant she wasn't from there. The woman continues flirting with him, asking what type he liked. But the truth is, he just wanted her to shut up. Even so, she sits next to him and asks if he was thirsty. If he accepted, she would manage to make him her little puppy. But he declines and says she could keep her cheap tricks. They wouldn't work. Unfortunately, there were too many people in the carriage. He couldn't cause a scene there. She then takes out a kunai, ready to change her approach. Mas Chenfeng was worried about the people around, and it left her somewhat dizzy. The men complained. Beauty really seemed to be everything, and Chenfeng boasted a little. She asked what he had done and why she was weak, and he said it had been a little key trick. Yuya Yamanaka began to say that he was surrounded and wouldn't escape, but the truth was that if the enemies showed up soon, it would save him some work. Moreover, if they kept focusing on him, the girls would be able to enter the country safely. Finally, he managed to see the Kunlun mountain. it began to threaten him. But with the energy sealed, he could do whatever he wanted with her, though first they would lead the train together. It seemed there was indeed quite a troop waiting for him. He was impressed. She had to admit she didn't want a handsome man like him to die, but the Koga were quite determined. Well, she could tell him who was behind it. That way she could be free, but Yuya Yamanaka said that the Koga do not betray, but there was no need to rush. They would have some time together still. The allied ninjas finally realized that something was wrong. Only Matsuoka Moriko knew about the ninja's power and thought he had fallen for her charm. In any case, they would follow them, but after a while we lost sight of them in the forest. But in reality, it was all part of Chenfeng's plan. At that moment, he thought the woman was a traitor, but she was actually just trapped. He threw a kunai, but the young man caught it. Now their lives were in his hands. Yuya Yamanaka was confused to see her enemy not letting her die. In the meantime, Matsuoka Morihiko ordered his men to attack, but that number of ninjas was nothing to him, and in a few seconds, she pierced her sword through all of them, leaving the only one standing, jaw dropped. His strength was indeed greater than the ninja had imagined, but Chenfeng had known this for a long time. The guy opened his clothes, and several insects began to emerge from him, and as they passed by people, they devoured them completely. The girl ended up explaining how the guy's power worked, and Chenfeng thanked her. The guy was confident it would work, but the young man unleashed a wave of mana across the ground and exploded all the bugs. In a few seconds, he appeared behind Matsuoka Moriko and threw him to the ground. And since he liked insects so much, he would make the guy taste his own poison. Yuya Yamanaka was startled by what she saw, and when the young man approached her, she simply accepted his words to follow him. She began to take an interest in him. She had never seen someone of that level, and wanted to know if he had a girlfriend. But soon they arrived at the location the company had given him. She didn't know there was a camp for cultivators. Meanwhile, inside the Exu sect, screams were heard from all sides. Liu Zhang had finally reached the root of the situation, and a man was waiting to face her. The two began to fight, and you recognized the power she was using. She had talent, but still needed to mature some things. He would give her another chance to try to hit him, and as soon as he spoke, 2 needles struck her face and fell to the ground. Now it was his turn to play, and with the first attack, the old man threw her far away. She recognized that method of using ki. She had seen it 10 years ago. She asked if he had cultivated externally or internally, and as soon as the guy turned his back, she attacked directly at a vital point. As he turned around, she confirmed that the Exu family had been responsible for what happened 10 years ago and for the destruction of the Jang family, and thus, the external blood cultivation technique had ended up in his hands. But above all, she wanted to erase him from the face of the earth now. However, he trusted in his cultivation. Moreover, he had recognized her, not knowing how she was alive, but it was time to finish what they hadn't done in the past. She then said that even if she couldn't defeat him, the company would come after him. Sin had been responsible for teaching her that blood technique and reinforcement with iron. Just like the other teacher, he placed her in a bathtub to cultivate in contact with the beast's liquid and demonstrated it to her. At the time, she didn't quite understand what all that was for, but she knew there was only one rule: never cultivate with human liquid that wasn't her own, and besides that, she was taught where the vital points were. Every technique had an Achilles heel. So just like her opponent, she was also capable of using the same technique he had stolen, and with just one attack, she ended his technique. The energy resonated with his own energy, and gradually his body would become a puddle. But once, a coward knelt before her, begging for mercy, and he said it was Shizon who had asked him in the past to call the ninjas. He was behind everything. Well, he would have the ability to share this news with the squad in the other world. Jang Ki had just discovered that Shizon had escaped from the hospital about 3 days ago, which was very suspicious considering the recent events. Someone appeared calling her and saying they were under attack and needed to flee. The guy said they would return to the Wu, and Cheng was already on the way. But she found it strange. If they had found her, they probably had anticipated this attack. Therefore, they would go to Kunlun to meet with Chenfeng. Chenfeng was still shocked by the camp when Wu Ningning opened the door. He welcomed the two and invited them to come in. The woman felt a bit apprehensive, but he told them to continue investigating. The young man took the opportunity to ask for every little thing. They hadn't had students for a long time, so he was excited. But upon seeing the amount, Chenfeng refused. Wu Ningning asked them to wait. They could negotiate. Suddenly, the forest stirred. Chenfeng had to admit they had indeed been quick. Wu Ningning got excited. Finally, there was some action. He called his wife, but it was time for the baby's diaper change. So Tan Cheoking was not happy at all. Seeing that her husband hadn't listened to her, she stormed after him, furious. There were many cultivators throughout the Dragon Country. It wouldn't be easy to defeat them like this. But if Anna were there, perhaps they would lose. Meanwhile, an ambulance was crossing the country with Xia Shizan and Anna Yanjing inside. It seemed that the two were father and daughter, but they didn't have a very good relationship. He said that at the time he had no choice, but he sent the information to make up for it. But she didn't want excuses. She had been abandoned by him when she was little, and passing information to the Sakuras was all that kept him alive. Instead of worrying about that, he should be thinking about his current situation. Well, he would find a way to deal with the company and Mu Chenfeng later. She had to admit that the Dragon Country had some interesting people, but by this time, he should have already been caught by Masaharu and Naoto. The two watched from afar the chaos in the forest, and Yuya Yamanaka was surprised to see that the Koga were no match for that couple. But it seemed that another team had also come. Since he couldn't take care of her for now, he would let her go. It was better to get out of there. Unexpectedly, the girl began to undress. It seemed that this had to do with her power. She provided information about the snake ninja and disappeared. But now it was time for the truth. Using his aura, he forced the two to come down from the tree. Kamikawa Masaharu and Ishi Naoto had appeared. He was surrounded by snakes. Kamikawa Masaharu was the first to attack, and Chenfeng was curious. He cut the snakes around him, but while he was in the air, he was attacked again, and as expected, he dealt with all of them. The guy didn't give up, but Chenfeng was already heading towards him, saying that his techniques were indeed interesting but not good enough. Masaharu managed to protect himself and made a new invocation. Now he wanted to see the big shot escape from that. But for Chenfeng that was small fry and easy to handle. He threw his sword, and Ishi Naoto managed to stop it at the last second. The senior's technique was similar to the human liquid fortification cultivation. He had to admit they had talent, but they lacked improvement. Well, they wanted to see if his words were really true. To show what he was capable of, Chenfeng summoned a bow of swords and launched them towards them. This time neither of them was able to defend themselves. From a distance, he noticed a car approaching, and Jang Ki was in it. At the same time, Yuya Yamanaka had seen the entire battle from atop the tree. She couldn't believe that the two had been defeated so easily. Chenfeng made a call to inform the company, and soon after spotted the girl in the tree. She could come down or try to escape if she wanted. Knowing what he was capable of, she decided to stay by his side and warn him about the ninja's plans. But before she continued, he asked the girl to get dressed. She said that the Koga had set up several ambushes on the road, and that car was probably in danger. However, he trusted his companions and knew their capabilities, but it was strange for a ninja to be concerned about someone from the land of the dragon. Well, she had been trained since she was little, and when she grew up, she was forced to do things she didn't want to. And to finalize her training, she had to fight her best friend, so in reality, she hated that place. Well, the world was truly cruel, but if she wanted a new life, he could provide it for her. Jang Ki and the guards were running up the mountain. They knew Chenfeng was there, and they needed to find him soon. But in the middle of the way, one of the men was caught by the ninjas, so everyone went on guard to protect the woman. The ninjas made stealthy attacks, but they defended in their own way. Suddenly, one of them came from behind. The guards defended their leader, but they ended up losing their lives. The driver, seeing the lady in danger, ran to her, but he was also caught along the way. Jang Ki was surrounded and alone. She fell into despair, not wanting to lose her life there, as she had just achieved everything she wanted and wanted to stay alive. And at the last second, Yulan arrived, hitting the ninja squarely. Finally, she had managed to find him. Seeing her alone, the ninjas prepared to attack, but in fact, the girl was not alone. Suzy was with her, and the company team had also arrived. Now it was the ninjas who were surrounded. Jang Ki was happy to see them again. Nothing was better than a helping hand. From a distance, Chenfeng and Yuya Yamanaka observed the power of the company. Everything was very different from what her former boss, Anna, preached, the girl said. And the young man was curious to know who she was after all, since she was the leader of the ninjas. Yuya Yamanaka said she was a psychopath who wanted to destroy the land of the dragon. This made Chenfeng laugh. She would have to reincarnate at least 1,000 times to achieve that. The couple from the cabin had returned, and as expected, Tan Seoking was giving her husband a good scolding. Like a remorseful dog, he returned to the cabin but was stopped by Chenfeng. The company had found nothing about him, so it was better to start explaining himself. But Wu Ningning said he had nothing to say, and the young man stopped him again. That was already stressing him out. It was better for the guy to leave soon. He had a family to take care of, but it wasn't so easy to get rid of Chenfeng. The two began to face off. Chenfeng had to admit that this guy was the closest she had found to being near her level. But there was still a long way to go, and since he didn't want to waste much time, he said he wasn't there to fight. He just wanted to know the truth about Kland and hoped that Wu Ningning could guide him. But he was one of the protectors of the peak. He couldn't accept troublemakers. Suddenly, a loud cry came from inside the cabin, and at that moment, he changed his posture and ran to see his son. It seemed that the child wanted to play a little, and seeing that scene, Chenfeng was in shock. Yuya Yamanaka took advantage of the moment and said that if he wanted a child, he could help. But they were soon interrupted by the arrival of the girls. Sizzy used her charm to invite him to her hotel, but he declined. Seeing Jang Ki, he said that the girl shouldn't have gotten involved. It would be dangerous for her family. But now it was too late. She was already involved and wanted to help. Sizzy commented on how insensitive he was being to the girl, and he ended up accepting the situation and thanked her for the help. Since she was involved, they could go together. But now they needed to know more about that couple. Coming from the forest, Liu Zhen appeared and explained that this was the lineage of the Guardians of Kunlun, and it only had ties to the Gu family, which is why there was no history. He asked who the girl was. After all, few knew about that, and she threw him a piece of gold. Engraved on it was the ancient formula of the Gu family, but it had been lost a long time ago. Where had the girl gotten that? Well, she hadn't found it, but she had been taught. Liu Gu had been her teacher when she was little, just like the others in the group who took care of her. He made sure to teach her every step of the production of her formula through the balance between yin and yang. At first she found his explanation a bit confusing, so maybe in practice she could understand. But could a little girl really grasp that complexity? When Aining remembered her, he was happy to know she was alive and had returned to fulfill the mission of Squad A, and that group of people was accompanying her in this. He hands the baby to his wife and asks everyone to come in. When Chenfeng passes by, she says they had worked hard to save Liu Zhen, and it was better not to leave her hanging. Well, the young man would do his best. Pan Xiaoqing wishes them good luck, and everyone enters a passage of the temple. They say Kunlun has 3 levels, and one of the doors leads to the 3rd level. Since they didn't have the key to one of them, he would open the other so they could enter. But they had to be careful. He already had few friends and didn't want to lose more. However, if there was an easier way, Chenfeng preferred it. Ning tries to stop him because it was an enchanted door. But the truth was that only the thunder technique could open that door, so he was the only key. Leaving the boy surprised, his master had never mentioned that. Following Chenfeng, the girls also enter the portal. In Yanbei, Xiaofen asks for news. It seems that Anna and her father were on their way to Kunlun, but the company had already sent a team to stop them. Well, that was good news, but she still wanted to see it up close. Uncle Cheng reminds her that she cannot leave, but the company was in chaos and her father was very busy. She would have enough time to sneak out, and if the old man was smart, he wouldn't tell her father anything. Besides, it wouldn't end with Sia, but someone had to pay the price for messing with her family. She hadn't made moves like that in years. She calls her aunt and asks to be taken to the Liu to start. The girl asks for explanations, but the master didn't want to talk to a little girl. But this little girl had enough power to destroy his sect if she wanted, so it was better to start talking. To show his strength, one of the guards hits the master and says that anyone who moves would meet the same fate. As he gets up, she says that in life, there are things we want and don't want to do, but if we don't do what we don't want, we can't achieve what we want. So it was better for him to start talking soon. He begins to say that in the past, her family was also involved, but if she returned, his family would also be lost, he said, throwing a toothpick at him. If it continued like this, it would be better to prepare for war against the Wu. Xia was his only assurance that everything would turn out well, but the old man was already more gone than here. Besides, it had been 10 years since the Wu had been in power, and there was a reason for that. He had no strength against her, so he had a choice. Accept the pill or the life of the entire Liu family. It was better that tomorrow his name was in the newspapers, or there would be problems. Well, he had to think about the next step. The old man from Zhao always pushed his grandson toward her, so he would pay her a little visit then. She had already eliminated so many competitors from Chenfeng's path. Soon she would get what she wanted. Wu Ningning was worried. He hoped they would be able to return this time. The legend said that the spiritual veins came from Kunlun and could only be restored there, but they didn't know how real that was and if it would work. They were in an era where almost all that energy had extinguished, but there was still hope. After all, Chenfeng was able to open the door with his own power. After a nice walk, Anna and her father arrived at the camp. Well, it seemed they had another job to deal with. He asks the group to retreat. If they left, there would be no need to fight. But that was not Anna's desire, and she attacks with everything. Wu Ningning realizes how dangerous that sword was and warns his wife that they had to destroy it. He attacks the intruder while his wife takes care of the ninjas. Both realize it was the traitor of the country, so now it would be an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Seeing that things were getting dangerous, they take the old man away, and Anna activates the power of her weapon. She used the power of fire as a blade, and she was already singing victory when suddenly Ningning just nullified her strike. The girl is in shock, and his wife couldn't be more irritated with all those ninjas from the neighboring country, who thought they were something but were just nobodies. Seeing what they were capable of, Anna realizes that the situation was much more serious. Tan Xiaoqing just wanted to finish everything quickly and go home, and her husband thought the same. They had a child to take care of. Knowing she wouldn't be able to handle both, she had an idea. Inside Kunlun, the spiritual energy there was incredible. He asks Ninja to stay in that place in case anyone from Koga showed up, but none of the other girls thought it was a good idea. Even Yuya Yamanaka thought he didn't want her anymore. But Kunlun was more dangerous than any other threat. Having a spy would help them. Moreover, her powers were perfect for this. If something happened, she could find them. Now that she understood his line of reasoning, Yuya Yamanaka was happy to help. She would keep an eye on the entrance for them. From that point on, the group had to stay alert. As one of the dangers, there was the soul miasma. He asks if Liu had come into contact with it, but she couldn't remember. Jang Ki asks more about it, but he only knew that they had to trust each other. They end up coming face to face with a skeleton holding a photo. It was all the members of Squad A. Liu Jian had searched so much for Hong, so in the end she was here. He hands her the photo. It seems that day was the day she was saved by them. When she was little, she was kidnapped by a group of opportunists and held captive for a while. But one night, Ji's group managed to invade their camp and rescue her. She had been very grateful to them for that, and unexpectedly, Han wanted to take the opportunity to capture the moment. Chenfeng offers her a tissue, but the girl declines. They needed to move on. He comments that she needed to be careful with her feelings, but she replies that it was none of his business. Still, they were in Kunlun. They had to be careful with negative feelings. He had done research before they entered. If a person had a very strong feeling of hatred or revenge, they could have problems. Yulan was also worried, but it was better to let her breathe a little. If things went off track, he would find a way. Anna's team had somehow managed to get through and were in Kunlun. Until then, she hadn't seen anyone from Squad A or Mu Chenfeng. Her father also found it strange. It was better for Yuya Yamanaka to guide them on the right path. As soon as they entered, she had spared the girl's life precisely because she knew she had information. So it was better that she was telling the truth, or she would change her mind. When they reached a portal, Anna's team also arrived. Liu reacted instantly. Anna tried to hit her, but the girl dodged. Her cuts could be deadly, but they were slow for her. As soon as she kicked, the enemy defended. She also found her kicks very arrogant. She had been taught that only a calm ninja could catch their prey. But Chenfeng stepped in front, since she wanted to fight someone so much. Let it be with him. Anna was happy to be fighting with him. She had heard a lot about the guy. Well, for him, in return, she was just an abandoned puppy wanting to be fierce. She still had a long way to go to defeat him. She was confident, but he was even more confident. Back at the camp, Tan was holding the baby. Ningning had managed to protect both of them at the last second. She worried about her husband. He had to focus on healing his wound now. But what had happened had driven her crazy. If they couldn't enter, then she would make them leave. The two of them decided to activate the 4th floor of Kunlun, but that would cause both of them to lose their powers. But they didn't see a problem with that. At least they could take care of their child in peace, maybe even teach him to cultivate. It was a shame to know that this could also cause Kunlun to cease to exist. After all, their family had always had the duty to protect its entrance. However, Wu Ningning still bet that Chenfeng would be able to prevent that. Suddenly, in the middle of the fight, a hurricane of power appeared on the ground. Chenfeng asked everyone to fall back. Something was wrong. He was worried about that. His ki was also reacting. And as the curtain of power disappeared, they realized that their enemies had also vanished, and now a spear had appeared right in the middle of everything. That seemed to be a weapon left there by someone, and at that moment, Liu recognized it. It was Han Ji's spear. In Yuju, the president's niece, Wan Qian had returned from England. He was happy to see her again. She had arrived just in time for tea. The girl sat down and asked if he had tried the Japanese tea she had brought him last time. But the man preferred local teas. He thought the flavor was better and fresher. She had to admit, it was indeed delicious. This time, she had brought him a can of coffee from England, and he laughs. It seemed that the young people nowadays did not know how to savor the traditional. They start talking about business. Liu was interested in the pharmaceutical company Wilson, but it seemed that the Sia group had already closed a deal with them. It was new to see him interested in external companies, but perhaps because Shia had been sick for so long, he should be looking for new methods. She asks for a bit more tea for him, and as soon as he drinks, he informs her that he has other commitments to attend to, and since he didn't like the coffee, he would take it with him. Liu thanks her for the gift attempt. He really wasn't interested in that, but it was good to see the young people open to new things. Perhaps that was a good thing after all. The two say goodbye and Wan Qian leaves. He asks Xiao Hu to accompany her in rethinking. He liked the idea of genetically modified coffee. Perhaps it would be a good investment. As soon as Wan Qian gets to the car, Xiao Hu appears with a bag of tea to give to her. Her brother had asked him to deliver it. The girl takes it and then leaves. As soon as she gets in the car, she asks to cancel the operation. She didn't want to end up like Seta Shizong. He was already old and she was still young. Moreover, it wasn't easy to deal with the veterans of the company. Wandering through the city, Tian Wanyan was having an ice cream. In the middle of the way, a man invites her for a walk, but she declines. However, it seemed that he was not alone. In a few seconds, she trips both of them, leaving the boy confused. That city was really boring, and she was out of ideas on what to do when suddenly she receives a call. It seemed that a squad was coming from England, and Hugh wanted her to intercept them and bring only one of them as a prisoner. She could take care of the others. The boy from before appears to confront her, but now he was out of time. She pulls him towards the river, but her clone disappears, leaving the boy desperate. Indeed, that city was very tedious. On the road, 2 cars with a group of soldiers from England were on their way to Kunlun. They were eager to get their hands on the treasure contained in those mountains. As they had been told, they held invaluable power. But things wouldn't be that easy after all. Tian Wanyan had been hired to stop them. Their first car is cut in half, but the second manages to stop in time, and the men get out to prepare against the enemy attack. Inside the deeper part of Kunlun, the group walked on guard. A hand of smoke appears and Chenfeng stops it. This type of smoke was capable of attacking the soul. If it weren't for the swords, they would be in danger, and the deeper they went, the more he could feel the power increasing. Liu Zhen also prepares. They had gone deeper than he remembered. Well, they were chosen people, each with a different lineage. If it weren't for the ninjas from the land of the Sakuras, they would surely have been able to win. They fought as they walked until they reached a pedestal with a fox guarding a box. It seemed that this was the spirit that accompanied Liu. Chenfeng asks everyone to step back. He would take a look inside the box, but Sizzy stops him. It was better to look around first. What if it was a trap? But he had confidence in his power. No matter what it was, he would be able to handle it. As soon as he opens the box, that thick smoke from before covers everything. Sissy and the girls move away from the area. Chenfeng activates the power of the 9 swords and creates a barrier trapping the smoke, gradually forcing it back into the box. And as soon as everything calms down, he sees the bottom of a fish inside it. It seemed to be from the Northern Sea, which was exactly where the immortal kingdom, Penglei, was located. This fish was called Kun, and legend has it that if a cultivator eats it, they would achieve immortality. Even if a human eats it, they would be able to heal from any disease. The squad had died there because of that artifact, she says, trying to destroy it. But since she had managed to obtain it, it would be a waste to do that. If her team had perished because of it, it was only fair that Liu kept that artifact. She holds it and feels as if their mission had finally been accomplished. Sissy is mega interested in the fish, but Chenfeng asks her to tone it down. Even Yulan was behaving herself, but she says that it was a treasure after all. Even if it wasn't hers, she was happy to at least be able to see it up close. It turned out that the other team had been teleported to the 4th level of Kunlun. They didn't know where they were, but they knew it was still within the spiritual realm. Suddenly, one of the men is hit by a fireball and has his soul taken. They had to get out of that smoke quickly. Anna wouldn't be able to protect everyone, but she wanted them to remember that they were Koga's most loyal warriors. Seeing what was happening, the old man felt happy. That was truly the real power, and if he could consume it, he would survive. A river appeared in front of them. Anna protects 2 ninjas with her power, but even so, they are caught. Seeing that they were trapped, she makes a desperate move. She throws all her ninjas into the river, and together with Yuya Yamanaka, they use them to cross the river. The old man thanks the girl for saving him, but if it weren't for him, the ninjas wouldn't have had to die. Anna still felt that something was not right. After all, everything was very quiet. It seemed that this was the end of everything. They could already go back to fix things. But Sizzy couldn't understand why there were no immortals there. At least the master of cultivation should exist in that place. Well, what mattered in the end was the journey. Even without immortals, cultivation itself was good for the body and soul. While they were talking, an explosion occurred, and Anna, Shia, and Yuya appeared. Without thinking twice, Liu went to attack Anna, and the two began to fight. Chenfeng asked Yulan to observe the two so he could learn new things. Liu managed to catch Anna off guard, but at the last moment she dodged. Sizzy was left speechless. If she had been in the enemy's place, she would have definitely been caught. Yulan asked what level of cultivation Liu was at the moment. He couldn't say, but from what he saw, Anna was definitely at a disadvantage. By the looks of it, she was going to attempt a final attack, but Liu would be able to dodge. And that was exactly what happened. Anna attacked Liu with everything she had, but the girl not only dodged, but also counterattacked just as he had said. As soon as she realized the difference in power, the ninja tried to flee. The man on Yuya's back asked why she was still standing there. Chenfeng then asked what the girl was going to do, and without thinking twice, she dropped the old man on the ground. She wished she could be by his side forever. Besides that, she knew that Seta Shizong was the mastermind behind the Koga ninjas and the assassination of the squad 10 years ago. He began to call her a traitor, but Chenfeng could no longer stand his whining. But the old man said he just wanted to live. When he found out he was in the 4th stage of cancer, none of the dragons could find a cure, and he needed to try another way. Xia then noticed a box lying near him. he started to laugh and asked who the selfish one really was, and Chenfeng made a point of recounting all the things that had happened because of him. But that was exactly the time needed for him to grab the box and eat the legendary fish. Suzy tried to stop him, but the young man held her back. The man's stomach began to swell, and the truth was that for someone who didn't cultivate properly, the northern fish was nothing more than a deadly poison. For 7 days, the old man would agonize until his body finally gave up. Xia then begged for mercy, but Chenfeng was not going to give him what he wanted. He had done enough things to deserve that. Yulan asked if it wasn't a waste for such an artifact to be ingested by a man like him. But the truth was that everything in life had a purpose, and if Xia was the final destination of the fish, there wasn't much to be done. The girl then became thoughtful and concluded that indeed all the Tao of the world was interconnected with yin and yang, and fate was probably already written. He said that the young woman was thinking too much, and that the most important thing was to never forget her primary objective. She became confused again, but he replied that it was just a matter of giving time to time. She didn't need to understand everything now. 4th floor of Kunlun. Liu had managed to go after Anna, and the two resumed fighting. Yulan and Suzy volunteered to help, but he prevented the two from participating. Liu had to fight that battle alone, and from what he could see, the enemy was starting to get anxious, but Yulan commented that if she were really at a disadvantage, she would have already lost. Whether she liked it or not, she had more battle experience than Liu. But Chenfeng asked his student to pay closer attention. The girl threw her spear, which passed very close to Anna's head. The ninja took the opportunity to get closer, but Liu still had a card up her sleeve and hit her with poison. The ninja recoiled, and the girl charged at her, hitting her back squarely. Her sword falls, and in the end she was unable to avenge her mother. Chenfeng approaches and picks up the weapon. It seems that the girl's mother had embedded her own soul into it. She begins to talk about how powerful the sword was, but after a few tests, he is able to break the blade, leaving her in shock. Well, they had finally arrived at the final route to Pinglai. Seeing that he was about to board the boat, Liu tries to stop him. He asks what she is doing, but the girl breaks free, and using a move, jumps onto the boat. She didn't want to fight him, but those years taught her that she could only prevent massacres like the squads if she became the strongest. He gets irritated, but she is already far away. If he had known it would be like this, he should have stopped the girl earlier. Anna starts to sweet-talk him to see if he would come to her side, but this only irritates him even more. He throws the woman away, hastening her passage to the heavens, and says that this was probably not the only way to Pinglai. President Liu was enjoying a nice tea in company when Xiaohu enters, informing him that his niece had already boarded the plane to Jang Bai. While the Wan family was a bit unruly, perhaps it was time to take the reins. The list he had requested from the squad in England had also arrived. Everyone had DNA modified by the Wilson Research Group, and John was their captain. For a moment, his secretary became worried about the girl they had sent to intercede for them. But Liu says he could rest easy because the girl came from a family of assassin illusionists, and if she couldn't handle it, she would simply retreat. Moreover, there were more important issues to discuss. Xia had not yet returned, and many people wanted his position. If they didn't take control soon and stay informed about the situation, some families could end up going to war. Thus, he wanted Xiaohu to keep an eye on the leaders, and any news or suspicious movement should be reported immediately. The secretary then leaves while Liu continues to enjoy his tea. On the road to Kunlun, the soldiers were struggling to deal with the girl in orange. Whenever they thought they had hit her, they discovered they hadn't and ended up being eliminated. John tries to attack her head-on, but she uses one of his companions to defend herself. One less enemy. It seems that this squad claimed to be powerful but couldn't handle a little girl. Only 2 were left now. They would be easy to deal with. She throws the moonlines and eliminates another one. John didn't know how this was possible and was about to attack the girl with everything he had, but she easily faced him and disarmed him in seconds. If she could take his weapon like that, she could easily cut him down, but she wanted to play a little longer. He was as strong as someone who had just started cultivating. How was a little girl able to defeat them like this? But the answer was simple. She had been trained since she was little, so she was not a mere beginner. He begins to plead for his life, but that wasn't necessary. She needed to take one of them back alive to the company, so he could relax. President Liu was watching everything through the camera, and he asks if the other leaders were also accessing it, and Xiaohu says yes. Everything seemed to be broadcasted to the entire company. He takes the opportunity to check if there was any news about Chenfeng, but since they entered the temple, hours had passed and nothing yet. Well, if they didn't return, they would have to find a way to sort things out in the real world. From the Dragon Temple, the 2 master brothers had sensed the opening of the Kunlun Gate. Chenfeng had found a great opportunity. But would he be able to cross the river to Pinglai? Xuanfeng wonders, and Xuanlin says maybe not, but who would be able to stop him? This time, Kland mobilized the company, the land of the Sakuras, and even England. He wondered how all of this would unfold, and whether he would be able to cross the river or not. Action Wanfeng had already told him about the dangers. Now it was up to the young man. From within a river in the forest, Chen Feng's group appears. They hadn't expected the escape routes to be buried with the opening of the 4th floor. Fortunately, they had found a hidden one. Jang Ki asks what he would do now, but he was very irritated for having lost that chance. Yulan tries to calm him down, saying there should be another way. They just needed to find it, and he thanks the girl for that. From the middle of the forest, a woman appears carrying a man. They quickly discuss the situation, and the girl remembers to call the company. Chen Feng turns to Sissy and says it would be better for her and Jang Ki to return to the company. He would continue on with Yulan. Moreover, he wanted them to take care of Yuya and ensure the CEO's safety even at home. That said, he leaves alongside his student. Jang Ki feels a bit sad seeing them leave, and Sissy tells her that it's better to get over him soon. The young woman knew she wouldn't be able to keep up with him, and the woman says that if that's the case, she should stop, or she would only end up hurting herself. With that, it was time to return to Yuzhou. Wan Chan had just arrived at the Dragon Temple to seek support from the Jangi family. When she was surrounded by the Wu family's security, at first her security tried to protect her, but they had come peacefully and didn't want trouble. She then accepts the invitation and goes to where Xiaofan was, asking what the girl wanted. It seemed her father couldn't control his own daughter. A waitress arrives to take Wan Can's order, but that restaurant only sold tea and not coffee. Xiaofan jokes with her, saying that the young woman had been abroad for too long. Thus, she orders a bamboo tea and another of chrysanthemum. With the order placed, it was time for them to start talking. It seemed the girl knew that Wan Chan had come to visit the company. She also knew about the genetically modified coffee, and changing the subject, Xiaofan begins to ask her about Chen Feng. She asks if the girl just wanted to chat, and the truth was that she had stumbled upon her by chance. The one she was waiting to return was Mu Chenfeng. She questioned who this guy was after all, who managed to make the girl so infatuated. The girl then starts talking about how heroic and strong he was, and that if Wan Chan wanted to wait, she would soon be able to see him with her own eyes. But she didn't have time for games, she had things to resolve. However, Xiaofan still hadn't finished speaking. Yet Wan Qian also didn't want to hear more and heads back to where her car was. Chenfeng had just arrived with Yulan, and the two end up crossing paths. She notices something different about his presence but brushes it off. She calls her secretary to come up, but before that, the woman said she received a message. It seems the soldiers who came from England were decimated, and John was missing. This news leaves her in shock. She needed to do something about it soon. She goes back to Xiaofan and asks why the girl hadn't informed her about the soldiers. She is ignored due to a message, but then the other asks her to sit down. How would she explain to the Wilsons that the super soldiers had been decimated, she wonders. But before thinking about that, she had to explain why she had brought foreigners into the country, so it was better for her to sit down quickly. Many people in the company were not happy at all with that news, and the bosses were now discussing how to deal with her for betraying the country. At that moment, Wan Qian realizes the mess she has gotten herself into. So she asks Xiaofan what she wanted in exchange for her help, and the girl asks her to follow. Meanwhile, Yulan and Chenfeng were requesting permission to have a conference with Master Xuanfeng. But for now, the master was not receiving visitors. Seeing that it wouldn't be easy, he asks Yulan to step back. The men warn him about what trying to force his way could cause to him and the company. But as always, Chenfeng was short on time and patience. He needed to get through, and if they wouldn't clear the way, he would make his own path. 6 of the disciples surround him to attack together. They were excited to fight the guy who claimed to be the best in the realm. In the first attack, Chenfeng sends one of them flying, and in his next move, he disarms all the cultivators in the area. Others arrive, and he tells them not to interfere. Getting what he wanted, he calls Yulan, but is soon surprised by Xiaofan's presence. He asks what she was doing there, and while they talk, Wan Qian arrives and realizes who he was. The girl asks if they know each other, and he replies that they don't. They had just bumped into each other at the foot of the mountain. They head towards the bridge, but Wan Qian stops them. She says she wants to talk to the masters too, and if they help her, they could be friends. But Chenfeng wasn't interested in people like her. She says everyone knew what he had done in Kunlun, so it was better to be friends than enemies. He thanks her for her concern, but says he didn't need her support. She continues trying for a union, willing to pay whatever it takes. To try to push her away, he asks if everything would be fine if he wanted her. Wan Qian feels exposed, not expecting that response. It's good that she is the CEO of the Wan family. If she surrendered to him, they would be united. There was just one problem. Even then, he wasn't interested in her. But for $10 billion, he could consider it. He asks Yulan to stay with her. If the money came in within an hour, he could let her come up, and with that said, he leaves with Xiaofan in his lap. At the top of the tower, the two masters were having tea. Xuanling seemed to have gotten stressed with the game again, and his brother asks him to be a little patient. But he had lost 12 games in a row. There was no way to stay calm. Xuanfeng boasts about still being at the diamond level. However, there was something more important to deal with at the moment. Chenfeng had managed to climb the mountain. Well, his arrival was expected. The young man had enough determination, and if they ended up having to fight, there wasn't much they could do. Even so, if he got what he wanted, it would be good for the cultivation world. They had had problems with the White Lotus in their times. At least now things seemed more balanced. They needed to receive him soon. The four finally meet and greet each other. He shouldn't have forced his way in, but Xuanling would let that slide. Chenfeng ignores him, and the senior really didn't like the way the kid acted. Xiaofen tries to ease things a bit, mentioning that soon his family would make a donation to them. That information completely changes the old man's mood. The three go up to the meeting room to have tea, but the tea could wait. Chenfeng wanted to know if there was another way to Penglai. Xuanling gets irritated, but the young man wasn't having his best day either. Due to his spiritual strength, the tea starts to boil. It was incredible to see the difference in cultivation level he had. Xuanfeng asks his brother to calm down, and Xiaofan does the same with Chenfeng. The truth was that they were waiting for someone, and it seemed they had just arrived. The couple from the camp enters the room, and at that moment, Chenfeng realizes that their cultivation presence has vanished. But the two saw this as something positive. At least now they were free. Xuanfeng offers tea, and they accept. Wu Ningning is curious about the young man's presence there. After all, he was supposed to be in Penglai. Upon hearing that, Chenfeng loses patience and decides to leave. But Xuanling asks him to wait. When he arrived, he wasn't well received, and now he couldn't leave. They needed to decide soon what they wanted. The girl agrees with Chenfeng, but what's done is done. At least they could talk a bit before he left. He knew the masters only wanted to use him, so it was better to make it something both sides could benefit from. Xiaofeng grabs him by the arm and asks him to tone it down and listen. Thus, he wanted to know everything about Kunlun that the couple knew. As long as they didn't break any rules or do anything illegal, the Wu family would grant them a wish after they shared. But they just wanted a peaceful life, getting straight to the point. There really was a second way to Penglai through the Northern Sea. However, that sea had been transformed into an island over the years. The two question. Well, the truth is that this entrance was hidden by an ancient barrier formation. In addition to dealing with this barrier, they would also have to contend with Samyo, the goddess of chaos, who was trapped in this region of Penglai, and if she escaped, it would be a big problem. If Mu Chenfeng inadvertently let that happen, the whole world would be against him. But whether a god or a beast, if they tried to block his path, he would crush them without mercy. But if it was that dangerous, why were they telling him everything instead of blocking him? Well, if the energy continued to decline and Samyo escaped in the future, no one would have the power to control her, so they preferred to take the risk and ensure the return of spiritual energy. He then asks why the two hadn't tried that path when they were younger, but Xuanfeng didn't want to talk about it. Since he had already obtained the information he wanted, it was time to leave, and as soon as he steps out, Xiaofan runs after him. It seems that Wan Qian had managed to fulfill the agreement, but Yulan says it wasn't quite like that. A man approaches and introduces himself as the head of the Pingyang Pavilion of the Northern Sea. This was good. He needed to go there in a few days, but it wasn't quite like that. That region belonged to northern China, and Chenfeng didn't have permission to enter. He asks Yulan if what the man was saying was really true, and she replies that yes, they only had power in the northwest region, and he hadn't mentioned that he was also one of the leaders of the Northern China Company. Because he made his fiance's life difficult, he was determined to make his life difficult in return. Well, whether he wanted to or not, Chenfeng would find a way to go to Pingyang in a month, and he could already go prepared as he would not be well received. But the young man was not asking for his opinion, he was just informing him. The guy starts to get irritated with Mu Chenfeng's demeanor, but if the Jangi peak couldn't stop him, Pingyang would be nothing. At that moment, the man loses his patience and charges, but Yulan steps in front. However, the impact was stronger than she expected. He praises the girl for being able to step in front of him. Her master should be proud. Mu Chenfeng picks her up from the ground, and the girl says she is fine to avoid worrying him. Xiaofan goes to them, but first makes a call asking for the Zhengyi sect to be surrounded. He wanted someone's head on a platter. She asks Yulan to concentrate. She would help her heal. A helicopter arrives, and the girl says that Chenfeng could do whatever he wanted. The Wu family would cover for him outside, and he thanks her. Wan Qian starts to talk to him, but is quickly silenced. It seems like a cat had bitten her tongue. The man approaches the two trying to stop him, but he is thrown away. The woman should be grateful. Luckily, he didn't like to eliminate those of the opposite sex. He would let Xiaofan take care of this. She tells him to stay calm. She would leave her paralyzed for at least 24 hours. As she walked towards the man in purple, Xuanling appears to interrupt. The Zhengyi sect did not accept private battles, but Chenfeng was already determined. It would be better not to interrupt him again. The phone starts to vibrate, and the young man immediately says that if it was to ask him to stop, he would make a point of leaving the company right now. He didn't want to stop. Since she had disappeared, northern China had been going off the rails, but even so, he didn't want to pick a fight with the Jangi. It was better to respect the rules. The young man hangs up, and President Liu goes back to enjoying his tea until Xiao Hu arrives and informs him that John was already in possession of the company. It was better to start the genetic modification research on him and about Wanyu. Soon there would be a festival, and he wanted her to participate in the magic numbers. Upon hearing that, the girl runs in and hugs him happily. Another explosion occurs, and the guy returns to the fight, saying that not even the Emperor would be able to stop him now. Well, he wanted to see what the handsome guy was capable of then. He comes using all his speed, but Mu Chenfeng dodges his attack effortlessly. Trying a new attack, he starts to circle around. But as soon as he tries to hit him from behind, he is stopped and thrown to the ground. He was very weak. It was a miracle he had lived this long. Coming from behind, the two masters of the peak appear, but they are also interrupted. From what it seemed, both wanted to measure strength with the young man. He wanted to follow the president's request, but now he wanted to know how powerful they were. At that moment, Zhuanling and Xu Wenfeng retreat. They had no interest in having enmity with him, but if his fight with the young man continued, the sect would have problems. Xiaofen's guards arrived at the scene. As soon as they received the order, they all invade the mountain. Chenfeng appears and asks her not to do that. He didn't want to cause any more confusion there. He would like to return those two to northern China and ask for explanations from the company. Something strange begins to happen with Yulan, and Xiaofan becomes worried. But that was just the girl evolving. When she woke up, she would be at a new level of cultivation. She is happy to hear that and asks her men to take the girl to the hospital. And it seems she had received a phone call. As soon as she answers, her father's voice can be heard throughout the temple. So furious was he. With the calmest demeanor in the world, she says she would not do what he was ordering and would resolve things her way. It was better for him to focus on the company. She would take care of the rest. Even so, he insists that she return, but the girl hangs up and hands the phone back. Chenfeng is worried about the girl's relationship with her father, but she says he doesn't need to worry. Later, she would just ask nicely, and he would forgive her. In northern China, Chief Bai Fei received a message from Chief Wu. It seemed that his children needed a lesson, and if Wu was not able to teach them, as soon as they arrived in the north, Bai Fei would make sure to teach them a few things.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.